Good afternoon and welcome to the April 22nd, 2024 work session of the Board of Education of Charles County. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Well, today we are definitely here to celebrate, and I am very excited. We're going to begin with recognition of some of our state award winners. Is that you, Mr. Conley? Come on. All right. Okay, David is on this way.
Make sure we get the students in the room before we start talking.
Parents are here, but
They're lined up and ready to go, I bet.
Oh, awesome.
some of the principals.
Yes.
Not yet.
Well, while they're filing in, I'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, Board Chair Moore-Lee, Vice Chair Kramer, board members, Superintendent Navarro, staff, family, and friends. I'm Richard Conley, Executive Director of Schools in the Office of School Administration and Leadership. We're beginning our ceremony today by recognizing several groups of Charles County Public Schools students who won first place honors or awards at the state level during the winter season. Our first group of honorees this afternoon are high school athletes who placed first in state competitions in cheerleading, indoor track, swimming, and wrestling. Athletes from 3 schools will be presented to you by members of their school's administration, beginning with Douglas Dolan, principal, and Chris Butler, athletic director from La Plata High School, followed by Corey Dobbins, assistant principal at North Point High School, and then Dana Fenwick, principal from Westlake High School.
Thank you, members of the board, staff members, and parents and students. I'm excited to introduce La Plata High School's 7 state champions today. First, representing the women's wrestling team, 11th grader, Miss Daisy Rojas. She is coached by John Pankhurst. Daisy won the 145-pound state championship, becoming the first girls state champion in La Plata High School history. La Plata High School had 4 men's 1A, 2A, 3A swimming state champions. These gentlemen were coached by Miss Mary Jane Couples and Miss Shannon Abilende. First, 11th grader Gavin Abilende. He won 2 individual state titles, including the 50 and 100 freestyle for the 2nd year in a row, and the 200 freestyle relay, in which he and his 3 teammates broke the state record. The next 3 gentlemen make up the 3 swimmers on the record-breaking relay team. 9th grader Jackson Donick. 11th grader Clinton Couples. And senior Mario Curtis. Again, these athletes were coached by head coach Miss Mary Jane Couples and Miss Shannon Abilende. Congratulations, Gavin, Jackson, Clinton, and Mario. Mary Jane Couples also coached 2 very accomplished female 1A, 2A, 3A swimming state champions. 11th grader Jaden Woolsey won the 50 freestyle. For the 2nd year in a row. 2-time state champion Jaden Woolsey. Congratulations, Jaden. Our last state champion to be recognized is the most decorated swimmer in La Plata High School history, senior Adeline Donick. Addie has finished first in all 6 individual races that she participated in at the state championship competition. This year she won the 100 freestyle and the 100 backstroke. She is the state record holder in the 100 backstroke and the 200 freestyle relay. Adeline has accepted a scholarship to swim at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington in the fall. Congratulations, Addie Donnet, and all of our state champions.
Dr. Navarro, board members, parents, families, students. My name is Corey Dobbins, assistant principal at North Point High School. I'm Mr. Capel's designee. I'm here to announce our state champions for the 4x200 meter relay. Jaden Hall. Donovan Gamble. Christian Machette. And Amir Duff. One of our coaches, Mr. Charlie Poole, is here with our students. At North Point High School, we are very proud of our student athletes and wish them all in future seasons.
Good afternoon. I would like to introduce the first ever state champion cheer team of Westlake High School. First, we have Miss Kennedy Elaine, who has received a scholarship to Xavier University of Louisiana. Mia Bensall. Amaya Cahoon. Joshua Davis. Mariah Eckert. Aubrey Lagones. Camille Malden. Kanaya Myers. Michaela Newman. Chloe Pinkney. Nyla Parker. Vanquell Robinson. Mackenzie Williams. And they couldn't have done it without coaches Yolanda Stennett and Serena Savoy. Next, we have our indoor track state champions. Gabrielle Garner in the 55-meter dash. Ibube Michibe, who's also an All-American. And our 4x200 meter relay, and they competed in the nationals, and they are also All-American. David Nabucco. Christian Wilbon. And Kendall Tyson.
Board members, that concludes our athletic honorees for today. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Jack Tuttle, the content specialist for social studies, who will tell you more about our next recognition and the students being honored for their roles as student pages to the Maryland General Assembly.
Good afternoon. Each school year, the opportunity to represent Charles County Public Schools as a student page is offered to our 12th grade students. They apply through a series of interviews and writing an essay, and starting in January, when the General Assembly begins their session, the students that are selected get to serve for 2 non-consecutive weeks. Their roles are everything from delivering messages and distributing legislative materials to actually working with staff committees and other legislative offices. I will introduce the students and then our principals, starting with Principal Tamika Little from St. Charles High School, will say a few words about each student. The students representing Charles County Public Schools in the 2024 legislative session are Sydney Gunther, St. Charles High School, Kate Kayla Pratt, Westlake High School. David Yum, Westlake High School. And our student page alternate this year is Carly Bowie, Thomas Stone High School.
It is with great Spartan pride that I present Sydney Gunther, our student page for the 2024 legislative session. Sydney is a phenomenal student who excels academically in our building. She's also a leader representing our representing our student body as the vice president of the Charles County Association of Student Councils. Sydney is an overall phenomenal person as not only a leader and a student, but we look forward to her excelling in the future. This, people, is Sydney Gunther.
So I have the privilege of introducing 2 students. First, Kayla Pratt. Kayla is involved in many things at Westlake: mock trial, every performance, every choir performance. She is Miss Westlake. Decided to go to George Mason and major in legal studies, and she would one day like to be a lawyer. And next we have David Yum. They both actually are actors in the community. David has also starred in a Disney program. He's an active member of our tennis team, and David has decided to go to Cornell and major in business.
At this time, Mr. Andrew Shoemate will introduce the students for the All-State Music and Performing Arts Awards.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Blumhart. I have the pleasure of recognizing students who auditioned for and were selected to perform in all-state music ensembles. These students auditioned back in November, competing against hundreds, in some cases thousands, of students around the state for just a few select spots in an all-state ensemble. This year, we are honored to have 11 students selected to perform, which, to my knowledge, is the most that we've ever had. A huge accomplishment. It's a testament to their hard work, talent, and dedication, and of course, their incredible and supportive music teachers. From North Point High School, under the direction of Mrs. Kristen Helming, in the Maryland All-State Junior Mixed Chorus is Joshua Butson. From North Point High School, in the Maryland All-State Senior Mixed Chorus, Darian Andrews and Mitchell Lewis. From North Point High School, in the All-State Senior Treble Chorus, Nadia Gaskins and Joyce Hubel. And from Westlake High School, under the direction of Mr. Mark Pavlisik, we have Zion Calloway. Ramsey Haynes, who could not be here but still deserves recognition. Joshua Peltzer. And in the All-State Senior Treble Chorus, Isabel DeProza and Kayla Pratt.
Congratulations again.
And we have one more student who could not be here this afternoon, but under the direction of Mr. Wesley Harler from La Plata High School in the Maryland All-State Senior Orchestra is Elizabeth Tober.
Thank you, teachers. You guys are incredible.
Oh, yeah?
We're gonna arrive early. We're like,
Okay.
I got to bring it in. I forgot. It was
What will we do?
I seen them outside. I was like, oh, it looks like I'm missing something important.
Right, yeah. Wow. All right. Let's give them a minute. All right, congratulations again, everyone. Absolutely outstanding. All right. Next up, we will continue on with our reports. This is the portion where we try not to take it personal that the room is now empty. We will hear from Mr. Kevin Lowndes, the Chief of Teaching and Learning, and his report will be on the textbook selection for African American AP, for the African American AP course. Oh, and welcome to our Charles County Commissioner Vice President, Mr. Ralph Patterson. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully you brought your checkbook. I'm just saying. Yes, okay. Make sure you use it. Ah, there we go. Good afternoon, welcome.
Vice Chairperson Ms. Kramer, Dr. Navarro, and the rest of the board members. It's great to be here today. This afternoon we are going to present the feedback that we received on the textbook for the AP African American course. And I'm going to have Mr. Jack Tuttle, who's been organizing this and collecting the feedback, present this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Lowndes. At the March 12th board meeting, we presented a proposal for a public review and potential purchase of a textbook for the AP African American Studies course. The proposal was based on the review of 4 textbooks that had previously been listed by the College Board as suitable resources for the course. The textbook recommended by the selection committee is From Slavery to Freedom by McGraw-Hill. Per board policy, this textbook's been made available for public viewing and feedback from March 12th through April 19th, this past Friday. The textbook and accompanying teacher resources were accessible here at the board in hard copy, but primarily virtually using the CCPS website. Access to the resources and completion of the feedback form have been advertised on the Charles County website, through social media venues, and as part of the school system weekly updates and newsletters over the last month. In addition to these public access sites, direct emails were sent to the various groups listed on this slide. In collaboration with Director Sylvia Royster and the Office of Community Engagement and Equity, we emailed a variety of groups, including parent advisory councils, Equity Task Force parent committees, Charles County Association of Student Councils, and many others. And based on our last meeting and a board recommendation, we included the Special Education Citizens Advisory Council as well. On the next slide, thank you, Mr. Heim. We had a total over the last month of 14 respondents. Of those 14 respondents, they identified themselves on the form that was provided, 7 as parents, 2 as teachers, 3 as parents and teachers, 1 as a CCPS staff member, and 1 as a member of the Charles County NAACP. Of the 14 responses, 12 were generally positive responses to the book and to its potential approval. Without going through every single one of the comments that were made, I will note that on this first slide, the first 6 that were generally positive, that comments were made along the lines of the content was rigorous and appropriate for AP classes. The textbook appears to be very comprehensive, and it's refreshing to see this history will be taught in our schools today. On the next slide, these 6 additional comments that were positive are listed as well. All of these, by the way, are unredacted. They are precisely as they were submitted in the forms for the board's information. Couple comments here. I appreciate the inclusion of history until the modern day, which students will recognize. Another comment, I appreciated the breadth and depth of coverage. And then finally, I believe this will have a positive impact on our students and allow them to learn and understand African American history in a more honest and transparent way. On the next slide, there was one of the 14 responses that did not directly address the issue of the textbook and the approval of it. This comment, to summarize, the full text is on the slide, is that there's a lack of equity and diversity in being taught in the classrooms, and it's important for our children to learn about their history, and that there are so many resources to assist with this in Charles County. I, for the sake of the board, did list a number of initiatives. I'm not going to go through all of them, but a number of the initiatives, especially in the last couple school years, that have been initiated by Dr. Navarro or the Social Studies Department, or in general through our Equity and Diversity Group, regarding those types of issues that I believe are raised in the comment by this respondent. In the next slide, thank you, Mr. Heim, we did have one specific response that was against approval for the textbook and was critical of the book in the sense that they believed that it was inappropriate and incorrect. I believe, as I interpret the statement, that this is in direct comment to the title of the textbook. They note that the title is wrong, that how can we trust what's inside, and African American history should never begin with slavery. This was a discussion at our meeting last month, I had some questions asked of me in regards to the title versus what was actually in the textbook. And so I put up on the slide below that, in the early African societies, as well as in modern American, African American history, the various topics that are addressed in the textbook. I cannot say that the College Board has all of these modern American topics within their curriculum. In the last iteration of their framework, which I mentioned in the March meeting as well, they had omitted a couple of these topics and placed them under, in their framework, what they called further explorations, which can be, I believe, addressed by teachers after the assessment, since one of our main priorities for this course, I believe, is preparing students for the AP assessment, and then using the time post-assessment to address some of these topics as well. That being said, on the next slide, Mr. Heim, thank you again. The next steps are that this is one of, I believe, a number of action items this afternoon for the board to make a decision regarding how to move forward with the textbook. And with that, I'll leave the time, of course, for questions and answers from the board.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Tuttle. As always, I appreciate your very detailed presentations, and also the fact that they're responsive based on the feedback that we gave. Because I was one of those people that had deep concerns about the title of the book, and I agree with the person that provided the feedback. It's at best misleading. And it's just really, I do have issues with that. But before I offer my 2 cents, such as it were, do any of my colleagues have any questions or comments? All right. Oh, lots of feedback. Okay. Ms. Kramer, Ms. Samisha Thomas, and Ms. Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Tuttle.
Ms. Butler-Washington.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tuttle, for coming back with this feedback. Just a couple of questions. So about the feedback that you received, did much of that, I know you said you kind of described if they were parents, teachers, et cetera. Did that come from the solicited public feedback, or was that from the direct contact with some of the organizations that were listed in the presentation, or was it a little bit of both?
I'm going to assume it was a little bit of both, because I honestly have no way of monitoring that.
Okay. Okay.
I'm assuming that the direct email that I sent to the educational committee representative for the NAACP completed that particular comment, because
Right.
I got that fairly early, and it was almost immediately after I sent that email.
Okay.
As for the others, I really wouldn't be able to determine.
Okay, no worries. I was just curious about that. I have to agree with Chairperson Morley, and I also expressed concerns about the title. It's I know they say don't judge a book by its cover, right? But it did give me pause, reading it, and that's why I think we discussed in our meeting when you first presented it, what was the content in the book? Where did it begin? Because we certainly don't want to have history for Africans or African Americans being taught beginning at slavery. So I'm glad to see that there are chapters that talk about ancient African history and ancient tribes and things of that nature, because I do think that if you just look at the title, it is very misleading and it's kind of off-putting, to say the least. So just want to thank you for gathering this feedback, and those are my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Kramer. Ms. Samisha Thomas?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tuttle. I really do appreciate this. And also, I appreciate the community coming to look at the text and making sure that they were able to give their feedback. I do have 2 questions. One, we are purchasing this textbook, and as we purchase it, and this is just for my own knowledge, are we always purchasing textbooks in electronic version as well as hard copy? Because as things evolve, if we purchase it electronically, do we get like the latest edition, or so as things change that it continues to be updated?
The answer is that, since I've been in the county for quite a while, is that we have purchased textbooks only in the hard copy version before, but the last 3 textbooks that I've overseen the textbook selection process for, the government textbook, the U.S. history textbook just last year, and this one, we've purchased both the hard copy and the digital version. And to your point, the digital version is dynamic for all 3 of the books, including this one, meaning that there are updates that can be done in real time by the textbook company, whereas the hard copy is what it is.
Okay, perfect. I think that was for my education, but also for the public, right? Because we know that history is ever changing, and when we have to make corrections to history or things need to be updated in the textbook, that's a value to our students. It also is a money saver for us, because when you buy the digital version, we don't have to go, repurchase ones or have teachers having to redact things that are no longer relevant. So I think that's a great thing. The other question is, you talked about the fact that there are some things that are not directly aligned to the AP curriculum as such, that there's some, it's not direct correlation to what AP curriculum is teaching as well as what's in the text. How much latitude are the teachers going to have to kind of, course correct or ad lib or add additional things that may enrich the lesson? While we want the students to be prepared for the AP assessments, we also do want to make sure that we're giving, proper curriculum, instruction, relaying history the way it should be. So do they have a little bit of latitude to around the fringes, add some additional things to enrich that curriculum that's over and above what the AP assessment provides?
Absolutely, and I think we laid the groundwork for that this past year, because again, in the March meeting, we talked about the fact that the teachers worked without an anchor textbook this year in this last pilot year. And so we did a lot of professional development and a lot of collection of resources based on the College Board framework to make sure that the teachers had some resources. They got additional resources at their AP trainings last summer as well. But this will provide a resource. It's just one of the resources they have, of course. It's an important part of the class, but it's only another resource. And I think that the teachers, especially leading up to the modern day component of the class and the recent topics in African American history, especially 21st century, that's something that there'll be continual professional development on that, and that will also be focusing on how we augment based on the what the College Board calls further explorations that can be addressed.
Well, thank you, Mr. Tuttle. That was helpful for me, because I do want to make sure that, we know, education moves a little slower than other things in the world, right? We watch technology move at a rapid pace, and sometimes we need to make sure that we can keep up with that pace for our students, and that we can continue to, make sure that they're at the cutting edge of education and innovation in education as well. So I think it's good to note this is not the sole resource, but just one resource. The teachers have professional development, other resources available to them, so that's helpful. Those are all the questions I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Warren.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. So my question is about professional development. How are the teachers, if this is approved and this is the text that they're going to use, what type of professional development will they have? And also, I saw that the teachers were a part of the group. Did they have was there any resistance or, any discomfort or joy, or what was the feel for the teachers being introduced to this book? I know history teachers, they love history, but just what kind of, for those that may be new to education and, the topics may, maybe make them feel a little uncomfortable or unsure, what kind of professional development will be provided for them?
Absolutely. So last year, as soon as we had the teachers in place that were going to teach AP African American Studies in this pilot year, I organized them together to start looking at that. I believe it was the second version of the College Board framework. And we started looking at the various resources that could come into play for the topics, going back to the early African societies and then going right up to the modern day. Maybe the most important training that they had is that every single one of them for an entire week went to various locations in the Mid-Atlantic region and went to the AP African American Studies College Board Summer Institute, which they have for all courses. But that was absolutely essential, I felt, for those teachers to get the kind of foundational training and also be there with teachers that were also either already they had piloted it the year before or they were piloting it this year just like everybody else. And to answer your sort of comment regarding teacher perspective, I got to say that the teachers were in two different places at once, and they probably still are, which is I have a very excited group of 6 teachers that loved the idea and still love the idea of teaching this course. They think it's a wonderful opportunity for them and their students. At the same time, they know the state of current affairs, and they were well aware of that. And we had a couple conversations along those lines, and they wanted to be, they're very much looking forward, I should say, to a textbook, which will help them sort of anchor their course without it being, as I mentioned to Ms. Thomas, the only course that they have. Not only that, I have recommended that they also go back to AP Summer Institute training. I don't know exactly where all of them are at right now, but I'd like them to revisit that because we have the new version of the AP framework that came out in December. And there were enough changes where I felt like that was potentially warranted.
Just to let you know that all our teachers that are going to teach AP are asked to go to trainings during the summer. And one of the biggest benefits, and I think Mr. Tuttle talked about it, was you get a cohort of folks throughout the country that are teaching the same topic, and they interact throughout the year, sharing resources and then also asking and sharing how they're teaching particular topics. So it's one of the best things you get out of AP training is not only that week of training, but you get folks to work with throughout the year that are in different parts of the country.
Ms. Bella Washington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thank you for bringing this information, and I have to agree with Madam Chair and Vice Chair about the title. And I know that the title is just a title, but if I was sitting at home and my child brought this book home to me, and with the atmosphere of what's going on now in this United States, I would say, why would they purchase this book? Because we know that it's not true yet. I say yet, it's not true yet. So that's why I have a issue with the naming, because it's misleading. Because if people don't know their history, they will actually think this is true, and we know it's not. So the book itself, the framework of the AP, I know that somewhat is a line in there, but it's not all the way lined. So my question would be is, I know you say you have great 6 teachers that are willing to be able to teach this, but how much latitude do you have to change it could say pretty much something along that line, but you can change it so I can feel better saying it to you. I would like history to be taught as it is, because it's a reason for it to be there. The reason is so we won't ever do it again. I don't want to sugarcoat it, none of that, because I think that's what the day's world is trying to bring back our education, to sugarcoat it. My feelings are hurt. I don't want to say this, but the truth is the truth, and we are the adults in the room, so the students can get it. And I think it's more of the adults are not getting it. So, my main thing is just making sure that the 6 that you have gotten there, that, it has to be taught as is. It shouldn't be in a latitude to soften it up. The book didn't soften it up. But I'm very curious, what's the name of the other 2 books that you did not select?
There's 4 books,
4 books
total. The 3 additional books are a book referred to as Black History 365. The 3rd book is referred to or entitled Freedom on My Mind. And the 4th book is entitled African American Odyssey. I appreciate the point that you're making about the title, and we talked about that last month, and we also had the input by the one parent that had the comment about the book. So I did a little bit of research between March meeting and today, and I wanted to be very careful about sharing this point, which was that I looked at every single one of the books in terms of how well they addressed especially the early African societies and the modern issues without focusing on just the idea of enslavement of African Americans and the issue of freedom. Because myself, I don't want the idea of this is a single focus of the course to be part of that, because that's not the way the College Board handles it. And so in that research, I found that every single one of the books, I'd say it's almost identical, the amount of space-time chapters that they devote to the early African societies and the, I should say, 21st century modern issues of Black and African Americans. So I just wanted to make that statement that I'd done that research. And I even, last week, before I came in and talked about the General Smallwood issue with Dr. Navarro, I met with the sales representative of her own accord. She contacted me, who's the sales representative for this book. And I brought up sort of, this is the current status, and next Monday we'll be talking. She literally agreed to check with the publishers that she works with about the potential small batch renaming of that text for our purposes. I honestly didn't think that that would go through, and it did not. She got with me, back with me about a day later and said, the publication is the publication as far as the title of it. But I think this is, and this is the most important thing I want to say about this, is that the title itself is a learning experience. I think that the naming of that book and teachers being able to talk about what the book does beyond that, regardless of the fact that it has a name that sort of focuses in on one area of the African American experience, is something that's a teachable moment. And I think that's something that will be part, well, I know that'll be something that'll be part of professional development in this coming year, not the AP component, but the part that I'll work with the teachers on.
Okay, so when you said that the other three books pretty much mirror the same, I think it would be safe to say that if the same material is in there, we can get a book that the naming of the book would be a better suit for the audience, because just like I said, when this book was brought home to me, I would be at the next meeting. What's the problem? Why did we name, why did you give the students this when you had a variety of books to give to? I just think it reflects of what we are thinking, because the naming is everything. People don't say it, but it is everything. And so, you know, if they got the same material in all the four of the books, we can, to me, that's me. I would like to, you know, maybe let them vote on the other three books, since it got the same information in there. Thank you. You can respond. I'm just saying thank you. I was finished.
The only thing I wanted to make sure that that I'm providing the board is that I have no stake in the process in a general sense, but the main thing I want to try to do is to represent the wishes of the textbook selection committee as much as possible. There were other reasons beyond titles or content that this book was chosen, and their comments reflected that, which means the ancillary and the digital online resources were exemplary compared to the other resources. And for me, honestly, the biggest impact that's going to have is on the teachers doing their job and the students learning the material. And quite honestly, that's where my priority lies more than anything else, is that whatever resource we decide on, that is the best possible resource we have at this time.
And I don't think you were saying that the content was exactly the same, right? You were just saying the amount of time each textbook addressed the areas.
Yes, right. It was just the number of chapters and the time that was given to it was about the same.
But they had the same language, meaning the same focus in all of the books, right?
Yeah, all of them are trying to mirror as best they can in a very short time frame what the College Board is revisioning as they go along.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Lucas?
Hi. Thank you, Ms. Morley. Just so I'm clear, so the College Board sets the framework. And so how again were these four books arrived at for review?
Honestly, this was the easiest gleaning process I'd ever have to do, Mr. Lucas, is that the College Board actually listed those resources in some
Okay.
of their previous publications. I didn't have that opportunity in previous years. I had to pick from the variety of resources that were available, like a U.S. history or a government book. This time I had the College Board guiding me to choose those 4 books and help that be the only 4 that we were looking at for the selection process.
Okay, so they came from the College Board. Got it. So another question, slightly off topic, but hearing my fellow board members request for things. If, say, and this is for Dr. Navarro too, we wanted to offer a history course, and I'll make up a name, the history of Atlantis, because I don't want to offend anybody, right? So a fictitious name. Okay, but not an AP course, right? Just a history course. What would be the process for that? I mean, would it have to fit into an existing framework developed by the state? And I'm asking because, if there's a desire for the board to offer classes that deal with more modern, say history of Africa or any other continent, or ancient, back thousands of years, is that something that we could pursue and develop?
So we could do
Yeah.
that, but we'd have to go through the process. It's just like when a teacher wants to do an elective course, and they come up with the elective course and they submit their framework and why they want to do it and what they're going to teach. And then we put together a committee and we look at it, and then we also look at, the state and what the state guidelines say as far as in regards to offering that course and whether we can get it approved by the state to be one of the courses.
Okay, because sounds like we were, handcuffed may be too strong of a word, but you're just really driven by what the College Board and the framework they set up, and then the textbooks that were offered. So again, if there's a desire for a deeper dive into some specific areas, something we could pursue in the future. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? No. Go ahead.
I just want to thank you, Mr. Lucas, for saying that. And I know you said that the College Board brought it, but we know that the College Board negotiated with the Florida governor, right, and changed it. And to the HBCU presidents got on board and pushed for the change back. So trusting and saying College Board, I don't have that much faith if you can change, ask someone to do something. And this change is for 50 states and not just for Florida itself. So I'm just saying, the book itself, the naming, it says something. And I'm curious why they changed, what they selected the name for. So I'm gonna do a little digging. But, I just wanna make sure that my colleagues know that, that did happen this year for the College Board. Thank you.
Thank you. I also have concerns about the fact that we only had 14 people respond. I know we don't necessarily get an overwhelming response, but if memory serves me correctly, this is considerably lower than responses we've gotten to other books that we were considering, including, I remember, the Hispanic textbook, and I believe there was a history book as well. So that in of itself is a bit alarming, to be candid with you, because going forward with a survey response of 14 people, you can't arguably say that's a sample of the population. So.
And I won't forward that it is. But I will say that because I was sitting right here last year with that U.S. history textbook, and I was here with Linda McLaughlin, and I don't remember her numbers.
Yeah.
But I did look because this year, 14 was not a real representative sample.
Yeah.
Last year, I had precisely the same number.
So usually,
respondents.
unfortunately, that's about the same number that we get. I will say Frog Street was different, and that's why I mentioned it. Like, I think the
Was
little
an
frog
anomaly?
out front, we should put a frog maybe on this book that people came and they read it and they looked at it. And part of it was probably the length of the book as well, and the materials. The pre-K materials were not as thick as the
More
history books
user-friendly.
are, and so.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, a lot of my questions and comments have already been made, including the main one that I started out with, so I won't belabor the point. But thank you both very much. This is up for action later this
Yep.
evening.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we're supposed to recess Let's see. Yeah, I think that's all we need to do for now. Okay. All right, everyone. Well, we are on recess then. Let's see. Until public forum at 6 p.m. All right. Please take us off the air, Kyle. Welcome back, everyone. We will now begin with public forum. Mr. Schwartz.
I'll read the rules for public forum. Speakers should identify themselves. Statements should be brief to the point and limited to 3 minutes or less. Board members should not be expected to respond during the forum to statements made by speakers. When appropriate, CCPS staff may address the speaker's concerns directly. Statements should relate to Charles County Board of Education agenda items or any education-related topic with the following limitations: personnel matters, pending or potential appeals, or the comments regarding the actions or statements of individual staff or the private lives of any individual are not appropriate topics. Proper language and decorum are required at all times. This evening we have one speaker, Kevin Gibson.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Kevin Gibson. I live in La Plata. I have a first grader at Dr. James Craig Elementary School. I teach social studies at Henry Lackey High School. There are several aspects of the grading committee's proposal which I think are beneficial, and several about which I encourage you to ask more specific and clarifying questions. I think the advantage of having an updated and uniform county grading policy is that it ensures equity across classes and across buildings. As the matter lies today, different classrooms, different teachers, in different schools all have individualized grading practices. I'm in favor of the proposed 50% rule. The way the proposal reads and the way it was presented have two different meanings. The way it reads is that a student who gives good faith effort can earn a 50% for an individual assignment. The way it was presented is that students cannot earn lower than a 50% on their final quarterly grade, whether they put in effort or not. I would encourage you to have the committee clarify their intent with this policy. A 50% on individual assignments for meaningful effort is likely to be well received by secondary teachers. A 50% for the quarter, regardless of effort, is not likely to be as well received. This raises the question, what constitutes effort? On a 10-question worksheet, if the student completes 2 questions, is this a good faith effort? Is that a 50% for the assignment, or it is a 20% for completing 2 questions? If the 50% rule is adopted, teachers will be eager to apply it as intended. But to ensure equitable application, it would be helpful to provide some guidance and examples of what effort looks like on different assignments and in different scenarios. Please ask more specific and clarifying questions concerning the proposal for GPA class weighting for our CTE programs. As the proposal reads, the only courses receiving weighting will be AP, honors, dual enrollment, and early college. Many of our CTE programs stretch for between 2 to 4 years, with the result being either certification in a specialized skill, national standardized testing, the opportunity for college credit, or a rigorous capstone course and project. Are these programs less rigorous than AP courses because they do not result in the opportunity to take an AP test? Are they less rigorous than honors courses, which do not even have an end-of-the-year assessment? I would encourage you to dig into the details of the proposal to more closely examine why are we weighting some courses but not others. Our CTE teachers and Project Lead the Way teachers will be happy to discuss further details about the rigors of their courses and the lengthy trainings which are required to be certified to teach them. Project Lead the Way teachers require a 2-week training to be a certified instructor. AP teachers require a 4-day course. I'm also in favor of eliminating class rank. I feel that doing this would encourage more students to challenge themselves to take more rigorous classes without the fear of dropping in rank. It will also encourage students to pursue academic interest and not just weighted courses. It will reduce student fear of falling behind peers while also lowering stress. There are concerns regarding proposed changes at the elementary level as well. The concerns regarding the instructional versus grade level grades.
Mr. Gibson, can you please finish up?
I can.
Thank you.
I'm encouraging you to reach out to educators in the classroom regarding the impacts of these changes. There are educators who have valid concerns and questions that you should address before making changes to the policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Do we have anyone signed up virtually? Okay, that was the end of our public forum speakers. Thank you, Mr. Gibson. All right, we're going to go a little bit out of order. Dr. Jones, one more. I like how you played it off. He just kept strolling. I appreciate that you were ready, though. If you don't mind, we'll ask Ms. Acton to come up. Yes, and the superintendent's proposed fiscal year 25 budget. Ms. Acton and Ms. Fisher Davis, thank you. That was smooth. That was real smooth. That's it.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I know everyone is really excited to see these changes. These proposed changes that we're bringing to you tonight are based on the most current information we have as to funding. The county released their proposed funding last week, and we have some changes that have come from the state. We do not have confirmed numbers from the state, and obviously the county hasn't approved their budget either, but this is based on what we know right now. So what we're going to talk about tonight are the changes in the revenue. If these changes hold, we have a proposal for you as to what we can fund, which includes mandatory costs, blueprint implementation costs, additional positions, one-time other funding outside of MOE, reductions in the budget that we would need to do to even be able to cover these items. And then last but not least are the items that we would not be able to fund, the programs and initiatives that would be postponed. So the revenue changes that we have currently, the county funding is a decrease of almost 17 million. There is one-time non-recurring funding that the county, we are trying to get approved through MSDE, which is $612,000. And that would be for $250,000 that is for the ELC in Waldorf, and then the remaining is for communications equipment. And what that means is that amount there does not factor into MOE the next year. It's outside of MOE. We currently believe we have a $725,000 decrease in the state funding. And as I said, we do not have confirmation on those numbers yet. We're hoping to get those, we hope, in May. We'll see how that goes. And then there's a change in the fund balance transfer of $215,000. So the revenue changes in total are $17.3 million in a decrease. So based on those numbers, the proposed initiatives that we would be able to fund, mandatory costs of $22.3 million, which includes our health care increases, the bus contracts, MABE liability, our nurses contract, and our collective bargaining assumptions. You'll see that there's a decrease in the collective bargaining assumptions from our original budget, and that is due to change in staff, where we have retirees or resignations at higher levels and vacancies at lower levels. We also are proposing the blueprint implementation costs of $6.3 million, which includes the workforce development board and also the early learning center in Waldorf, the concentration of poverty schools, and that's pretty much all we have there in our blueprint implementation costs of $6.3 million. You'll see that we took out the $250,000 that was originally in our ELC proposal, because that hopefully is going to be funded by the county on one-time funding, and also the early college liaison, the $100,000, we took that out since that's not mandatory, although Mr. Lowndes will tell you it's mandatory. We have additional positions of $927,000. These are positions that the decision has already been made by Dr. Navarro that it's needed for operations, so those are necessary, along with the principal for the new elementary school. They normally come in a year in advance, and the secretary a half a year, and the building service manager a half a year. So those are $927,000 for additional positions. As I mentioned, we have one-time funding in these numbers of $612,000, $250,000 for the Waldorf pre-K facility, and TV production equipment of $362,000 if that gets approved by MSDE. In order to make those items possible, these are the changes that we've had to make in our budget. We've reduced short-term disability premiums, $996,000, ACA payments, $536,000, and then our extended learning opportunity amounts that we have in the budget: supplies of $33,000, wages of $2.2 million, and transportation of $1.1 million. That totals $4.9 million that we've had to reduce the budget to balance those items that we've mentioned. The postponed initiatives is $11 million, which includes everything else that was on the original budget. We do not have the extracurricular plan in there. We do not have the youth engagement advocates. You can see that the additional staff that we needed for transportation is not in there. If you turn to this next slide, we have a lot of curriculum that is not in there. The AP African American Studies textbook, the dual enrollment books that we need, other AP textbooks, those are not in there. We do not have our theater pathways budgeted. Pretty much all of the curriculum that was under Mr. Lowndes' area, we've had to postpone and not put in this year's budget in order to be able to fund the blueprint and the negotiated agreements and mandatory costs. Are there any questions for me?
So this is coming to you with a first look because, as Ms. Acton mentioned last week, the staff of the county commissioners presented to the county commissioners. The county commissioners will make their decision at a later date, but we just wanted to make sure that you saw what a possible impact it is based on the numbers that they released last week. So you see quite a bit in terms of postponements. The board, we will have this agenda topic again at the May board meeting so that the board can have a deeper conversation. This is the board's budget and can ask, obviously, questions tonight, but can ask more deeper questions and implications of what that looks like. And just remember that our numbers are also fluid as we get more and more information. I just want to remind the board that we are in advocacy mode right now. And so it's important for you to have this picture of what happens with the given budget as presented right now. Could happen. And then in May and moving forward, the board has to have conversations around what is the budget that moves forward then with whatever the final allocation is going to be for Charles County Public Schools.
Thank you very much, Ms. Acton and Ms. Fisher-Davis. Just before I take questions, I'm sure we have quite a few, just want to point out that as we had discussed when we went last week before the county commissioners, so much of our budget is set that we can't do anything with. I believe 77% is salaries and benefits, and approximately 12%, if I'm remembering correctly, is around these contractual costs like nurses, bus drivers, et cetera. So it does not leave us, unfortunately, a lot of wiggle room, and this is disheartening.
It is.
All right. Mr. Hancock, I saw your hand first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it, and I just want to thank Commissioner Patterson for being here tonight. I really do appreciate that, and I'm certainly not going to engage a one-on-one discussion with him, but I just want to acknowledge that. just want to acknowledge that you're here, and that means a lot. So
Show me the money.
I thank all of us. But that being said, $17.3 million, that's a big hit. That's, going into this budget season, I think we had we're under the impression we weren't going to get fully funded, to be quite honest, but that is a surprise, to say the least. And it's concerning to see all of the areas where we would have to balance the budget if that's the number that we have to work with. What really stands out to me is the cuts in the extended learning opportunities.
Same. That was
and I guess this question would be more directed to Dr. Navarro, what will extended learning look like with these budget cuts?
Yeah. Will we have it?
Yes, so.
Basically, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Will it exist?
Yes.
Well, so there was, yes, they will continue to exist. I think what you will see down the line is what gets taken away. We had support from the federal government that allowed us to offer transportation to students so that, you know, we always had summer opportunities, but you had to get yourself there if you were at the secondary level. We were also able to expand more original credits so that kids could get ahead, as well as having the opportunity to do this. So we are hoping to continue to run out our federal dollars. The board did create a little bit of a nest egg for this transition, in that the commissioners actually 2 years ago funded our full ask, and within our full ask there was a little bit of additional money for extended year opportunities. What I want to caution the board on is, over the next couple of summers, we can be in a trajectory of reducing our options as a result of it. The first one that might come is cutting back on the transportation. And what we have learned a lot is that at the secondary level, that allowed a lot of students to be able to come and take courses that before they couldn't get to. And also, we paid for a lot of courses to be taken as well. So not just, and it won't have an impact in this summer, because remember, we're talking a year ahead, but I just want to prepare us for what our families have had the opportunity to have during the summers and extended year opportunities. Those will take an impact.
Thank you, Dr. Navarro. And the reason it sticks out so much to me is I know in the last couple of years, and probably since you've been the superintendent, we've made great strides and great advances with our summer programs. And I think that it's money well spent.
Absolutely.
And you know, and if you look, one of my biggest worries, if you look at some of the data coming back on our test scores and stuff like that, they're not great. And my concern is, you know, this is an area that in a perfect world we'd like to advance and do more with. And my concern is if we have to make reductions in this area, I'm just concerned, not just with test scores, obviously, but there's a price you can't put on the students, a price that you can't see. And I think a lot of the students that participate, it helps them all the way around, and it gives them not just something to do in the summer, but for some students, it's the only place they might get a good meal that day. Yeah. It might be a safe place for them to interact with other students and other adults, and also help their education along the way. So hopefully, these numbers are not the reality. I hope. And I know we'll all do all we can to make sure that we can get a little bit more funding. But that's all I have. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hancock. Ms. Butler Washington, and then Ms. Samisha Thomas.
Yes, thank you for this. Yes, a big hit. I didn't know it was going to be this big. But I'm going to use my time to, I know Commissioner Patterson, you're here, but I just want you just to hear this. If we cannot fund all of it, look at the progress we have made for our DUA programs, our AP programs, and all of those advanced class that we have done. And if Ms. Acton, if you could give them, meaning the commissioners, that breakdown of that piece so they can see what the number is, that would be better than just 17 million, because we have made strides in this here. And I don't want to disappoint, the AP African American Study textbook, we just got through talking about it. We're just so excited, and to see it's on the list, I just want to make sure that, we know the budget needs to take care of the county to take care of everybody in the county. But I strongly believe economics, education. If you want a striving education, you must have a striving educational system. And I just want everybody to balance that out, because that is very important. These are our future. These are the ones we're bringing up, making sure that they take care of us when we no longer are here. So in able to do that, we got to keep, continue to strive and to be able to have these for the students. So if you could take that back to your board when you're discussing it and when you're going back, just make sure our students are not on the back burner. And that would be a great thing.
So basically from this slide, which begins with the AP African American History book, through the next slide, excluding the positions, which basically all of this falls in Mr. Lowndes' area, we're looking at about $1.9 million.
$1.9 million, if you could add that on there. That would, go a long way, because these are our future we're talking about here, and want to make sure that we do this.
All right, thank you. Ms. Samisha Thomas.
Ms. Acton, did you have something real quick?
Yes, I just also wanted to add that even by providing the opportunity to do the initiatives we have on here, that means that we go into the next budget cycle having to ask for this money again, because this is one-time funding that we're finding to be able to open up the Waldorf Center and to fund the blueprint. So it just kind of snowballs that it is going to get harder and harder to meet the requirements of the blueprint, and we'll be putting more and more demands on our ask of the county. So I just wanted to mention that, because this doesn't solve the problem, it just kind of puts a Band-Aid on it for 1 year.
Yeah. All right, Ms. Butler Washington. Yes.
I do understand that, and that's why, Commissioner Patterson, you saw my email when, and Dr. Navarro was on there, where we asked that the commissioners and the state delegation in August when you meet, and hopefully y'all will bring us along so we can we can fight for the pre-K. So therefore, if it's legislation put in place for this funding, because a lot of the delegation did not know that pre-K was not covered for every child. They was under impression, but when I sat down and talked to them, they knew it wasn't. So hopefully we could take care of that piece, so we won't have to ask, so it will come from Maryland instead of from the county. So hopefully we are a plus for that, and so that's another ask. So please fight for us to be at the table in August. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Acton. And from the commissioners, I won't pick on Mr. Patterson back there.
He's never coming back.
We do appreciate you being here, but I'm going to probably take a different position than my fellow board member, Ms. Butler Washington, because as I look through this, what saddens me the most is that we lose some of the innovation in our learning. Like the Wilson Reading Program, oh my God, how many kids who don't just learn in a certain way? Like we need to diversify how we teach, because we have students that learn in many different ways. And some of the children that are the neediest learners, and meaning they just need differentiated learning, we need these opportunities to be able to do the illustrative math, the Wilson Reading Program. And then in addition to that, where I saw the 504 accommodations, that we're losing 504, like that's huge, right? We have a population of students in the 504s that they need support, right? And to lose that. And then the other one is those positions. I know we just talked about, the positions, the PPW, our psychologist position, and our counselors. Our children right now, more than ever, really need the support of those social emotional supports. And for us to not be able to provide that to students, we know that students that are in a healthy emotional and social environment are better learners, just because they're free of the distractions and they can be present just for learning and not have to have those other distractions. So for me, I am really sad to see that we have to take away the things that will make our students open and able to learn and will help them be able to come to school that healthy, well-adjusted, supportive environment so that they can do what they're here to do. And what we're here to do is to, take them on their educational journey. So those are the pieces that, when we look to that, we want the public to come out too. Go talk to your commissioners because we're in this together. We're all in this together to be able to try to make sure we can support our students. So thank you for this. But those are the pieces that sadden me. The kids that need the most are the ones that are losing the most. I appreciate the AP students, right? But to get in the AP class, you got to have good grades. Those students are already getting there. It's the kids at the bottom that we have to prop up, and we need these things in order to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. I want to add also and to remind parents, we are having a town hall tomorrow on this very subject here at 7 p.m. Hopefully, Commissioner Patterson. Oh, how convenient. Yes. Yeah, of course.
He said regrettably.
I know. Respectfully. Okay, I believe Ms. Smith and then Ms. Kramer.
Hello, good evening. First and foremost, want to apologize for my colleagues for being late. Had a professional emergency that could not be helped. Still education related, so apologies for being delayed in my arrival. Still in the pipeline, yes. But just to say, ditto to whatever all my colleagues have shared in terms of their disappointment. I too am disappointed. I definitely want to double down on what Ms. Thomas just shared in terms of those students who are struggling the most, who need the most supports. But I did want to talk about our strides in AP. I think we've consistently heard the superintendent talk about being more inclusive in our advanced placement classes, ensuring that we're capturing all the students who have an aptitude to be successful in those classes, but not only supporting them in getting through the classes and being successful, but for those students whose families do not have the funding to pay for these AP exams, supporting them and paying for these exams so they can get credit for the courses they've sat in for the entire school year. Double down on everything my colleagues have already shared. I'm woefully disappointed. I understand that the commissioners have a very difficult job, and they look across a number of budgets, but woefully disappointed just given sort of what this county has done relative to education, the strides that we have made. One of the very wonderful things about serving on the board is that you also get a chance to see what other counties are doing. And Charles County has been head and shoulders moving in the right direction relative to our spending, relative to our blueprint implementation, some of the challenges and sort of pushback that we've heard from other sort of sister counties, we have not struggled through. And that's because we've consistently had the support of our commissioners. Not to say that you all aren't supporting us any further, you obviously are, but just noting that I am woefully disappointed in the cuts that we will have to make given the strides that we've made. And this budget truly is reflective of what the community wants. It's not reflective only of the sort of setbacks that we've seen relative to the pandemic and sort of the direction that we were looking to go as a county. It's also reflective of what parents have clamored for, what parents are demanding from Charles County as a system and sort of the supports that their children need, the opportunities they'd like to see them sort of stretch into, the out of school learning time that they'd like to see them sort of exposed to. We are sort of painting an educational picture of what our county is looking to see in terms of supports and opportunities. And to see us sort of have to take a step back, it's just disappointing. So I'm just hopeful that there's another pot of funding that you can dig into, Commissioner Patterson. You can kind of let your colleagues know that we are looking for that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow to sort of make us whole.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Acton, and for being here, and Ms. Fisher-Davis too. Well, since everybody else said it, Commissioner Patterson, thank you for being here as well. And I truly don't want to pick on you, but I think it's good that you're here. I know you heard some comments from Chairperson Moore Lee last week, right? Last week about some of the really important things, a lot of which is included in this presentation. And for me, we all have our things that stand out to us, right? And so agree with Mr. Hancock about the extended learning opportunities. Of course, all the curriculum, things that we may have to postpone. But one thing that really stood out to me was the extracurricular activities for middle school, because that's something that I've really advocated for since I've been here. And it was something that I've heard directly, not just from parents or community members, but from the students. And that is something that really I feel like will help our students in so many ways. And middle school has been asking for that. High school has a lot of opportunities, not that there couldn't be more, but middle school really, we really could step up in middle school. And so that is something that, I'm really sad about because I was so hopeful to see it included in the budget. And was like, yes, we're going to get there. And then to see this again, I guess, to Ms. Smith's point, disappointing is just the only word that I can use. I do have a couple of questions, though. So to Ms. Samisha Thomas's point about the 504 reductions and special education. So if I'm reading this correctly, are you looking at, Ms. Thomas, were you looking at under the blueprint implementation? Because I thought that is what we are funding. So I just want to clarify what we're not funding in terms of special education.
Yeah, this is on slide, I think this is slide
13.
13,
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
sorry, yeah, slide 13, I'm sorry, under the description, it said meeting 504 accommodations and services. And there
Gotcha.
was also another area, I guess that's slide 11, persons and children with special needs equipment. Those two stuck out to me.
Gotcha, okay.
It's very those students need that support. It's not a want, it's not a desire, and it absolutely shouldn't be hampered by the inability to be able to fund it.
No, absolutely. Thank you. I was just making sure I see an alignment with what you're saying. Another question I have is, so we keep talking about, some additional funding and things like that. So what, for our benefit and for the benefit of the public, what other funding sources are available or are we looking at that we think may be able to help us with some of this shortfall?
There is no additional funding. We do have restricted funding that comes from MSDE, but it's for specific projects or programs. We can't go out and get a loan or anything like that. All we have is funding from the state and the county. Our CFO meetings do not seem to indicate that there's any additional funding coming from the state. And quite honestly, the county's budget was pretty tight. So I would think that that's not likely to get a lot of funding from the county beyond what they've already proposed.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. My next question is about fund balance. So I know personally, and probably some of my colleagues too, you get asked questions about what the fund balance is. Can we use the fund balance to sort of cover some of these things? Can you explain, just for the benefit of the public, what fund balance is again? Because I know we've talked about this before, but again, with having a shortfall of $17 million,
right,
we're already hearing in the public, I know I am, well, we have a fund balance. Why can't we use that? What is that for? Is it a rainy day fund? Which I wouldn't describe it as that, but you're the expert. So I'd just like to ask if you wouldn't mind, just
Sure.
explain sort of what the fund balance is, what we typically use that for, why we have the fund balance, and what we have in the fund balance currently.
Sure. So we have approximately $30 million, not counting what would happen this year. We already have how much?
About 3.4, 3.3.
But didn't we add some additional to it?
We're going to propose, currently, right now for this year, it's
Yes.
about 3.3. We're proposing to add another 1.4.
Exactly. So we've already upped how much we're contributing from fund balance in this proposal. So what the fund balance is used for is one-time funding. So theoretically, if we said we're going to fully fund this budget and take it out of fund balance, we would then only have, for easy math, just say it's $15 million. What the fund balance is used for is we're self-insured on health insurance. So there's a certain requirement from an audit standpoint that we need to keep in fund balance to cover those medical emergencies that there's no way for us to predict.
Right.
We also have a technology line in there for technology issues. And the remaining is really used for building issues, a roof, an HVAC, something that has not been funded by the county because you didn't plan for it to break. If we deplete the fund balance, we have to go back to the county every time we don't have a budget for it. which may delay projects and not necessarily, I don't know. I don't know how easy it would be for them to start funding us on an as-needed basis, but I would think that that's not a position we would want to get into.
I appreciate that, Ms. Acton, yes, and given the situation that we're currently in, I don't think going back and asking for additional funds for truly emergencies is how I would describe the fund balance, is that it's a fiscally responsible way to make sure that we can cover emergencies that come up that we don't plan for.
That you can't plan for.
Right, absolutely, that you can't plan for. And I'm glad that you brought up the healthcare cost, because last year, I want to remind everyone that we were about, $3 million over, is that correct? Over budget. And that's nothing that we can plan for either, because you don't, as a system, you're not privy to claims or how often a employee uses their health insurance.
That's correct.
So these are things that I just think it's important for the public to understand. It's not a rainy day fund. It's not a let's just hold this until we want to spend it. It's being fiscally responsible, making sure that there are things in 39 buildings that could happen that we need to be able to fund. And on the dime, right? Wade's heat broke this past winter. And I don't know what the costs, ended up being for repairs, but those types of things are real and they do happen. And so I think that's helpful for the public to understand that it may look like we're sitting on $30 million, but truly that's not the case, so.
And even with the current budget that we've proposed here for you, at that rate, at using $5 million a year, because that has to stay as part of your budget moving forward. If we have to use that each year, we're out of fund balance in 6 years as it is.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. That was a great point. I appreciate you. That's all my questions. Thank you.
I think Ms. Samisha Thomas had her hand again, and Ms. Jamila Smith.
So while I won't pick on the commissioners here, I would like to also think about, as we go looking towards other funding. Ms. Acton, you did say there's just nothing else that we can find. But I do know that, there are grant programs out there, there's corporate sponsorship. So while we're asking the commissioners to find money, if you can't find the money, maybe you can find a corporate sponsor. Because I'm certain the Theater Pathways program would love to have, we have some great artists that have come from this town. The play that has, they got the Madden brothers, they can come sponsor something. So I would say we can be creative and innovative in finding funding in other places because, the Theater Pathway as well. But Ms. Acton, I would also really thank you from the public's perspective on noting that, because I think the audit piece, while Ms. Kramer talked about, what we need in the fund balance, the audit thing is important because we will not pass a clean financial audit if we do not keep a certain amount of money in our fund balance. And so we cannot deplete that. And we will not, because that's not safe operating from a financial perspective. So that audit piece is critically important. Did you say it's $15 million we have to keep in there for a fund?
No, I said if we funded this entire budget with fund balance, and let's say we had 15 million in there, we would not have enough of a cushion for health insurance alone.
Right.
So that would be an issue.
So thank you for noting that. I think that audit piece is really critical because we have to have a clean financial audit to continue to operate, and that's important. Thank you.
Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Acton, just curious, for the portion of our budget that comes from the county, I know similar to sort of our budget, there are times when we need to move money between line items. I'm just curious, what is the process in the event that there is an agency that does not spend its full budget? Does the county do any sort of look across all of its budgets to try to figure out if money needs to be shifted between agencies? Because there's just an agency that won't spend down to sort of zero.
So my understanding is, I think what you're asking is if they don't spend all the money, what happens? My understanding is we're the only I don't know what we call ourselves, but the only folks that get funding from the county that has a fund balance. So the others, the money goes back to the county if it's not spent. And I think as part of the budget proposal process that the county does, I know that they meet with all of the divisions, and they met with me. They talked to Dr. Navarro to find out, the sheriff, all of them to find out the needs, and they're trying to weigh the needs of each division against the money that they have.
So for instance, in the event that the sheriff's office doesn't need as many body cams as they projected, or we don't need to salt as many roads this winter, we just didn't have as harsh of a winter as that particular agency projected, and they no longer need that funding, would it then roll back up to the county for them to reapportion to another agency, AKA us?
I don't think they.
Is that a process that could be followed?
Like within the year, I don't think that they do that. I don't think there's a reconciling process until the end. You know, I don't know, you know, with the unusual needs of the board, maybe it can be something that we ask that they, you know, see if there's additional funding throughout the year. I mean, they do have the right to pull funding back from us, so maybe there's an opportunity to ask them. I mean, even though they approve a certain budget, if they run into fiscal problems, they can ask for some of that money back, so.
I mean, I just inquire because I know other agencies, not necessarily at the local level, but looking across different divisions or offices, they will do a reconciliation at some point before the fiscal year ends, just to make sure that all the money is expended and it doesn't go back to the grantor agency, whether that's Congress or in this case, the county, just to make sure that all monies are spent. And so they can realign monies between different divisions, offices, teams, whatever may have you.
I mean, one point that might be worth making at if you're, you know, going to go and testify is that the county is proposing 0 increase on income tax. If that ends up not being the case next year, would they consider, you know, allocating more money to the school system?
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Warren?
Just clarification. So when we get our funds, the money that we don't spend, does it go into the fund balance?
Goes into our fund balance. Yes, it'll carry over. If we don't spend it, that's what builds up that fund balance for us. We don't have to give that back to the county.
So the extra money, can we take it, well, I know it's, you know, I thank you for that good, you know, explaining what the fund balance is for. So when the money, so let me ask you this, let me just slow down. So you answered that first part of my question.
Yes.
So is that every year? Like let's just say in the last 3 years, if we had leftover funds, it all goes into is that how the fund balance is built?
Yes. So if we had leftover funds, then theoretically we could, if we needed to supplement our budget, we could roll it into the next year's budget.
But typically, we try not to have leftover money.
Okay.
So when we come before you, when we do the intercategory requests, that is us looking at areas where we haven't spent everything and reallocating those funds to different areas where we do have a need. So the goal at the end of the year is not to add to the fund balance. So that's what we try to work very hard to do.
And the reason for that is the list of items that we need to fund are huge, such as the things here that aren't getting funded. So, as Sherry said, it's a puzzle that she tries to align perfectly so that we're not carrying over additional funds.
And I'm just curious, I know Commissioner Patterson is here, but do the commissioners have an understanding, and I guess the public, hence Ms. Kramer's question, when people ask, well, you have a fund balance, why can't you just take from that? Do they, is that the understanding that that money is for those emergency purposes, or do they feel like, hey, well, you had leftover, so just take a portion of that and use it for where you need it, kind of thing? Is that an understanding?
They asked about it, you know, when we testified, and I explained to them, as I did here, that, you know, you don't want us to deplete it, because then we will be coming here every week or every 2 weeks and say, Tula needs this, and you know, because our biggest expenses that are hard to gauge are our buildings, and you know, what could come up there that needs funding.
I understand that.
So their budget would become very unpredictable if we did not have a reserve.
I understand that. One more statement I wanted to make. Ms. Thomas, Amisha Thomas, alluded to the grants and leveraging those relationships. I wonder if, in fact, we do not get the funds that we need, and maybe this is a question for you, Dr. Navarro. How could we shift, if we had to lose those extended or after-school programs, how could we build our relationships with the nonprofits in the county that are already providing maybe similar services or something different or, more innovative? How can we leverage those relationships or build those relationships through our community engagement division, if in fact we had to go that route? And even if we don't, how could we, just leverage those relationships and maybe use the resources that we have to partner with the nonprofits to offer those extended learning experiences, if that makes sense?
Well, I think we are going to have to think through how we find different opportunities to fund more options for kids. The reality is, when you're talking about $17 million, that's a lot of money for sort of one-time funding. The other thing I would offer is that a lot of our nonprofits right now are getting funded through us to provide those services. So we will impact some of the nonprofit partnerships because we won't have funding to continue those partnerships. Because they are right now working in our schools or working in our programs because we are funding them to do that work. So it's sort of a bifurcated, it's sort of like an interdependent process, because the funding that we have doesn't all stay within us. The funding that we have has extended. So I'll give you an example that, our summer programs, we worked to try to figure out with, what's the people, Kevin, that provide us after school for the kids here? Alphabet. So for a while, because we expanded the program and we almost quadrupled the number of kids during the summers taking extended learning opportunities, we were also able to work with, and we had sort of an equity lens of what are the key barriers that prevent students from coming. We went hard after transportation because that was a key barrier that some families are like, I cannot send my kid because there's no way I can transport them. And then the other key barrier that we said is daycare, because how many of you finish at, I don't know, our programs ended half day through all this summer, right? Parents work year round and they don't have summer hours, many of them. So we were able to fund and work with Alphabet to extend the day for kids in a meaningful way. And so those are the ways we have thought about expanding the programs with the opportunities. And so I would offer that we would have to go back and rethink our current, what is it that we're currently doing? What is it that we are going to say, no, this must happen? So then we have to go through a process of sort of saying, well, what do we stop doing as a result of having to do this thing that was supposed to be funded? And some of them may be postponed, and those also have impacts.
So, well, thank you for clarifying that. And I think I wasn't thinking about the ones that we're currently working with. I'm thinking about in addition to them, I would be sorry that they be impacted, but maybe some that are not necessarily partnering with. I don't know who they are, but I'm just saying there may be some that you all may not pay where they have their own grant funding and they're looking for opportunities to serve, but the connection hasn't been made. So that's more so along the lines that I was thinking. But I do appreciate you sharing that information as well. And Alphabet is great. I know a lot about them, along with the other ones. No favorites. All right, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one more question. So for just kind of thinking down the road for the 2026. So for 2025, our blueprint implementation cost is $6.3 million. Do we have any idea what it's going to be for the following year, or mandated costs because of the blueprint for 2026?
I have projected it out, but I don't have that with me exactly.
Okay.
What it would be, but it does significantly increase each year. And unfortunately, something that is said over and over by the AIB is that decisions will have to be made on what things that we currently do we will not be able to do in order to do the blueprint. And while that is not something anybody wants to do, it's the reality. Because to remind everyone that on the blueprint implementation costs, there's a state share and a local share. We don't get that local share on top of MOE. So what that means then is, according to AIB, we're getting fully funded for the blueprint, but a portion of that money was coming to us anyway and is funding other programs that we have committed to. So some of the tough decisions that we're going to have to make are, if we're going to fully implement the blueprint, which everybody here is committed to, what are we going to have to change in our operation? That's one of the things that Dr. Navarro actually talked about today to senior leadership, that over the summer we need to quantify the costs with a little more of a fine tune to see what it's going to cost us, because along with these types of items that you can see line by line, there's the 60% teaching rule, which is going to increase the number of teachers you're going to have. There's the career ladder that is supposed to incentivize the teachers. So it's a tremendous undertaking. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. And from my lens, looking out the 5 years, which I can share that information on what I projected, and an update if Dr. Navarro wants me to, it is going to get progressively harder to make those numbers. There's no doubt about it. Even though, so this year we experienced the foundation percentage increase was low. It's like 1 point something, and it'll go up to 4 point something next year. But there's other aspects of the blueprint that the funding doesn't keep pace with. Like, for instance, this year in the part of the decrease that I'm showing you on the state line is because in the reconciliation bill for the budget, the governor took out the funding for Tier 2 pre-K students that was in our original number, and then it got postponed. So those kinds of shifts make it even more difficult to project out the costs, because each year there could be changes. So it's just a challenge.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was alluding to, and it kind of seems like things are just going to get harder as mandated costs from the blueprint increase, and if we continue to have budget shortfalls, it's going to be hard to do anything outside of what's mandated from us. And it's kind of scary to think about it. The blueprint's a great thing. I just really wish in Annapolis they could have identified a funding source for it, and that would help a lot of things. That's my personal opinion for it. But.
Yeah. Adjusted MOE, I think that's our lobbying piece, right? Because the blueprint increases funding for certain things year after year after year. The devil's in the details of how much it costs, and I think I will say the funding locally did not go up. One of the things that Jake presented to the commissioners was the expected local budget that they're projecting for didn't quite meet the expectations, and so that is the dichotomy of us thinking long-term in terms of local projected income revenue. And how to potentially meet the demands of what we have in education with that set budget.
Thank you.
All right, I'll just have a couple of quick comments because most of the points have already been stated. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but for the benefit of the public and Vice President Commissioner Patterson, I just want to point out that we used to be funded at close to 50%. Of the county's budget, and now we're somewhere, I believe, around 41%. So that's a huge problem in of itself, which I understand. Competing priorities, well understand that, but we also have to keep in mind that, we're arguably probably one of the few places that you can expect an increase every year in terms of the customers that we have to serve. You know what I mean? There's no doubt that the amount of kids that are going to, we're number one in the country for African American wealth. Of course, people are going to want to come here, and they're going to expect a world-class education when they get here. And so all of these things that are hampering us prevent that from happening. And so when we have, over a $500 million budget request, $523 million, $30 million sounds like a lot, but I'm not going to do the math. That's your lane, Ms. Acton. That's not really that much of our budget when you consider. It's the equivalent of a savings account that, I said I wasn't gonna do the math. Let me leave that right there. But it's not much. You know, and as you mentioned, all these things are going into with us being, you know, self-insured, and the fact that we cannot run that into, you know, not even that we shouldn't, we cannot run that down to zero, because then we're gonna be putting potentially salaries and all these other things at risk. Can you, it's a two-part question. One, this is probably more for Dr. Navarro. Dave Ramsey has a saying that, you know, whenever you have, let's say, $1,000 and you have $1,200 in bills, you're either above the line or below the line. So once this $1,000 runs out, anybody below the line, sorry. I mean, and that's unfortunately where we find ourselves. Can you give us some insight on what went into some of these above-the-line decisions? Because I know this was painful. I know that you all have spent so many hours on this. This is not an easy, oh, well, we'll just get rid of this, because every dollar represents a student, you know what I mean, and a service that won't be offered. For the benefit of the public, can you just give us a little insight?
Yeah, so what we prioritize, which is a very difficult conversation, and it is a group effort of how we think about where do we invest and where do we have the longest return on investments. As you mentioned, Ms. Morley, our staff is our sort of superpower, our strength, and we need to retain our teachers. We need to bring in staff that wants to work here. And so one of the things that really was very, very important is to ensure that we are able to be, frankly, competitive. We don't want to lose them to any other county that shall not be named. And we need to be competitive. And I think this is one of those places. And the people who are here are doing incredible work, and we want to keep them here. We don't want them thinking that they need to go anywhere else, because we need them working with our students. The other big area that I would say is and that goes with the benefits and the contracts that we have. But the other big thing is our sort of, and I think this board is very supportive of our doubling down on early childhood investments. We presented to you a couple of meetings ago around the fact that for every dollar for dollar that we spend in early childhood, we will see that coming through as kids go through our school system. So the early learning expansion is extremely important. I am a high school teacher. And I'm saying that, knowing that, you know, I am on advocacy mode, so I am thinking about everything that we need to do. And, you know, as you also spoke to the commissioners around the state of our youth, it is very clear that our students need wraparound supports, and the community schools that is funded and it is supported through the Blueprint reform provides a lot of wraparound to entire school communities to remove the barriers that prevent kids to come to school every day ready to learn. So as we looked at that funding, at the initial numbers, of course, those were some of the ways we prioritize. And then we'll have, and I think in May, we are prepared to start talking through what are the internal conversations, if there's some non-negotiables that need to take place through with the board in that below the line, because in my mind, there's nothing below the line. There is the question of, and I asked Karen to make sure that she wrote in there what we postponed, because we have a commitment to children in this county, and our commitment is every day providing better and better opportunities. And we are in the business of education, which is a business of creating communities and societies where the next generation is better off than the generation that came before them. And that means that we are investing in making that happen, we meaning the adults. So, you know, I'm not in the details of what gets cut yet, because I'm all about advocacy, of telling the story and getting everybody to understand why we've got to make sure that we invest in our youth today, tomorrow.
Thank you. And I would highly encourage the public, if you haven't already taken a look at this presentation, because some of these things, candidly, I just made a note of what this might look like for the average parent. You know what I mean? Because we're talking about everything from, as you know, has been mentioned, secondary extracurricular, you know, $3.3 million. That hurts. You know what I mean? Our fantastic fellow thespians, as I jokingly say, you know what I mean, that put on all these wonderful plays, the theater pathways, to see any of that possibly be at risk. World language content specialist. Again, and ESOL teachers. I mean, these are all things that, none of these things, as Dr. Navarro said, are below the line. None of these things are things that I would ever say are, miscellaneous or extra. These are essential services. And so I want to really have parents understand that, extracurricular activities, possibly mental health services, as we talked about, partnerships with some of our nonprofits that are doing amazing work, just when we're starting to see some positive strides. I can take a hint, I'm saying too much. We're starting to see some positive shifts in the right direction. What is that going to look like for our students? And as you mentioned so eloquently, Ms. Acton, these are postponed, but postponed till when? That's my biggest fear. I'm envisioning a snowball, just kind of gradually accumulating. And if we can't get to these things for 2 or 3 years, one, what is that cost going to look like, and what are those students going to do in the meantime? That really gives me a lot of anxiety, if I'm being honest. So thank you all again. I very much appreciate it. Look, we'll be back tomorrow to continue the conversation. See you tomorrow. Yes. Thank you, ladies. Okay. I know Dr. Jones, are you sure? Thank you. And now. You were very smooth with it, though, Dr. Jones. You played it off well. So Dr. Jones will be talking about our school climate update. As Dr. Navarro would say, another spicy subject.
Dr. Jones and Dr. Blanchard.
Oh, Dr. Blanchard, yes,
Yes,
welcome.
yes, good evening.
Good evening.
The doctors are in.
The doctors.
All right, yes, good evening, Board Chair Moore Lee, Board Vice Chair Kramer, board members, and Dr. Navarro. Yes, I'm Marvin Jones. I do have with me Dr. Mike Blanchard, our supervising psychologist, and soon-to-be Director of Student Services, Mike Blanchard. Yes,
yes.
All right, so we are here to share our annual school climate presentation and update, and I'll grab that clicker from you if you don't mind. Yes, and so I will give you fair warning that we are going to probably run through relatively quickly, since we are understanding that you have had an opportunity to preview it. And so we won't go line by line, just to kind of give you a heads up, and we'll hit the highlights, and then we'll offer plenty of opportunity to ask questions at the end, all right?
All right.
All right, so just to start us off, our why and our goal, again, school discipline is highest priority for us. Sharing information always is a good thing, being transparent about our data. It does help us, even when sometimes it doesn't feel good. But that's the only way we grow, is if we acknowledge and talk about some things. So our goal is to just really share information and then think about the efforts that we are putting forth, and then how we can improve and move forward. The order of our slide deck here tonight just really talks about the how school climate is measured. We have some 3-year comparisons that will be displayed, contributing factors and parameters, the data, of course, and then the student services section here that Dr. Blanchard will talk about, the student behavioral health and wellness. And then what are we doing? So I'm just going to keep going. So just really quickly, how is school climate measured? Of course, there are 2 ways, quantitatively and then qualitatively. We believe to be equally important. The quantitative side, of course, is the numbers. And for us, one of the major ways that we measure school climate as far as quantitatively is through data, and looking at several different graphs and whatnot, suspension data, removal data, exclusionary data, I guess it is. And then and we'll look at some of that. And then qualitative, of course, is important, how people are feeling about the environment that they are working in or coming to school in, what the community believes about the school setting. Those things are important as well, as far as how climate is measured. The data will span the 3-year range. The year after COVID is the time frame that we look at, and we have gotten used to looking at our data right up through about mid-March. It helps us, one, because April is the month that we typically will have this presentation, so it gives us some time to just sort of get our ducks in a row before meeting with you all. And it so happens that we started this kind of, it's an annual thing right around the time that COVID hit, mid-March a few years ago. So one of the highlights is that our data looks almost identical as what it did last year. This is not a typo, if you remember. These numbers were exactly the same. The pyramid might have been a different color, but exactly the same. The percentage of our students who have, up to this point in the school year, have not had any disciplinary violations is 79%. Those who have had 1 to 2 violations is 12, and then the 3 or more is 9%, and that's, again, exactly as we were last year. This one I'll take just a couple of extra seconds to explain the number of students committing violations, the 3-year comparison to continuous enrollment. And so the green bar is enrollment, the blue bar is the number of violations. And so you may look at this one and say, when did we have 29,317 students in our district? A few years ago? No, not last year, not this year, not as an official enrollment count. And so what that really indicates is that is the number of students who were enrolled at some point in time during that year, so not counting any of the students who withdrew. So if we had no withdrawals, then that would have been an accurate number. So the reason that's important is because even though we had many students leave us, some of those students who did leave could well be included in the violations that occurred. So we thought that was something to take a look at. And if you did the math on it, if you look at 21-22, that school year, it amounts to about 0.48 referrals per student. Last year, 22-23, amounts to about 0.89 referrals per student. That number of students, 29,477. And then this year, it amounts to just under 1 referral per student, about 0.90, somewhere around there, if you're looking at it in that way. Just a different way to look at some of the numbers there. Again, thinking about the students who were with us and perhaps could have been contributors to some of the violations. Some of the acknowledgments that we cannot get around, and we simply must acknowledge, and to be frank, these are our challenges. Areas that where students, where we've seen these incidents increase, that may be contributed to a lot of these things that you see here. They typically are, so this is our work in progress slide here. Students not always responding to adults when they're trying to help, the desensitizing or sensationalizing of unacceptable behavior through social media and those kinds of things. So none of this is, I think, are things that are a surprise to anyone at this point, the easy availability of things that are not appropriate. I will mention this one, the teacher's willingness to intervene in altercations is decreasing due to safety. I think that's a real thing. We certainly have always wanted our teachers to intervene, but not at the expense of their own safety. Right. And we are seeing more and more of that sort of thing. We because sometimes our students just have some issues that they're working through. They're just not that easy. And so teachers, understandably so, are being cautious about how they are intervening now. Verbal as much as possible, absolutely. We understand when they may be not as quick to intervene physically. We understand that now, but we are working to work with our teachers and our staff, offering trainings and whatnot, and so we'll get into a little bit of that as we go forward. Parameters addressing student discipline, again, federal law, state laws, MSDE, local board, all contributes to or informs our student code of student conduct that we put in place for our district. Violations comparison, this is a 4-year comparison, so we did talk about it being a 3-year comparison, but we, as we talked about this, we thought that year that COVID hit, I guess before COVID, we thought that this was really one we just really kind of wanted to see, particularly in those areas that have the tallest bars there, the major disrespect, the major disruption, and major physical attack on students. How do we fare compared to before COVID? And so you can see that major disrespect looks like it's up a little bit. Major disruption is down a little bit. Major fighting is, again, compared to the COVID year, 1920. Major fighting is up just a little. So not necessarily things that we're proud of as far as being up, but we wanted to be transparent in the data that we wanted to take a look at to see what areas we need to continue working on. We pulled this slide out separate, this violation weapons, just to, again, the 4-year comparison, just to share it. Again, in all transparency, major firearms, so the real weapons, 2 last year, 2 this year. So again, 2 too many, but that's where we were. Major other guns, those that aren't the real weapons that shoot real bullets, but they certainly look like guns. You can see where we are, down a little bit from last year, from at 9 compared to 13 last year, and then the other major other weapons, knives and whatnot, we are down some. So going in the right direction. Still a lot of work to do there. Disposition comparisons, I certainly won't go through these. It's print's kind of small there, but this is what happens from parent conferences to whether it's loss of privileges or detention, suspensions, suspension of superintendents. All of those you can certainly take a look and then share any questions that you may have. Percentage of violations by school level. So this one is probably not a surprise, very similar to last year as well. The purple, a part of each bar, bless you, are the high school students. So those are the ones that we see the majority of our disciplinary violations at the high school level. The blue bar in the middle is middle, of course, and then elementary is the orange bar. So again, not much different than last year. Use of exclusionary discipline. So the blue is bad, red is worse. Students who are suspended out of school, and then students who are suspended to the superintendent. So in one sense, you know, our numbers have gone up, at least as far as out-of-school suspension. So in one sense, that's not something necessarily to be happy about, but at the same time, that is an indicator that we are keeping our schools safe, because you know, our charge to our administrators is that you suspend when you have to. It is not a first resort, it's a last resort, but you suspend when you have to, and at all costs, we need to keep our schools safe. Oftentimes, that does result in suspension, and those numbers are up, as you can see. Suspensions to the superintendent are down a little, but out of school are up. And Dr. Blanchard is going to share a little bit about what student services is doing.
So what are we doing about this? So we've done a number of different things as student services, obviously in partnership across the county. Specifically, one of the things we're looking at is universal screeners. Not only looking at severity behavior, which we'll talk about with SOS, but also just general student perception of their learning environment. So the first piece is signs of suicide. This is a very cost-effective program. It does not cost much. It's basically a video program that counselors and school psychologists go into health classes, and they present these vignettes, so to speak, these video situations, and they ask the students about their perceptions of that. At the end of that, they will ask students if they need to talk with someone after that. You can see the numbers here. And actually 2 students, we actually had to make a referral and send them to the hospital due to having active suicidal ideation. So we believe the cost of this is actually immeasurable, considering we caught 2 students and were able to get them the help that they needed. The other universal screen we use is something called baseline. And we say student positive perception of learning environment because we have, and this is trends, these are qualitative trends. They're not a causal, we can't connect it from one piece to another. But the trend indicates to us that our students are perceiving, this is their perception of their environment. There's less behavior, their perception of that. They are feeling more engaged in their classroom and their learning. They have increased academic self-confidence, in other words, their ability to be successful in their learning environment. And they're feeling more connected at school. One of the things we're hypothesizing, again, these are hypotheses, we can't make a causal connection, is that, you know, one of the major initiatives is culture and climate initiatives in our school buildings through our PLT process. And that has been a major initiative over the last 2 years, and we're starting to see some positive outcomes with our students based upon their perceptions of the learning environment. Screenings and assessments. Now, we've talked about this before, very briefly. A safe screening is when a student makes a statement saying they want to hurt themselves or potentially hurt someone else. They're referred to a school counselor who will ask them a general set of questions. As you can see here, the 4-year trend, COVID year 19 and 20, you could see there was a significant reduction because our students weren't in a school building after March. The next 2 years, you see a significant increase, and then this year, we only did the numbers through April, so you see that number in parentheses is what our projections are for the end of the school year. So we're seeing a similar trend over the last 3 years. Behavioral health assessments, that's when the school psychologist may get involved in doing more thorough evaluation of the student. And again, you look at the trends, we're high for this year. If our projections are accurate, this is going to be our highest year over the last 4. And then what a threat assessment team meeting is in a situation where a student has made a threat towards a school building, another student, unfortunately staff member, adults in the community. We may do a threat assessment on them, and then we ask for the teams within 24 hours to meet and talk about what interventions we're going to put in place for the student, because in many cases they're returning back to the school building after a disciplinary measure. So we have to do some things to support them. And you look at the numbers. Now that's not a positive thing, but we're trying to get on top of issues. We're seeing the universal screening data as an indicator that we're doing pretty good with our students. One of the challenges we're facing is personnel. The demand in mental health areas, as we've talked about already today, is increasing. The supply of available personnel to address that is we're having trouble keeping pace with the demand. You can see the numbers here. Our biggest worry, to be frank with you, is in our school counselor population. We're trying all different approaches to address that, whether it's going out to schools, going out to job fairs, sending stuff out through social media, having our school counselors contact their old schools and working with personnel there to try to get interns in and so on. So we're doing a number of things to try to address that moving forward. On a positive trend, through our hiring process, I think that number is going to go down for school psychologists. I think we're going to be at maybe a net -2 or 3 versus 6, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
We have a mental health clinician, behavior support teacher. So in all, we're down 21.5 positions, in essence, to address this increasing need of students. However, now look at the positive side. We have a whole bunch of different initiatives that we're doing. This is all through either ESSER funding, and we'll talk about consortium grants in a second. ESSER funding has allowed us to do youth and adult mental health first aid training. We've tried to expand mental health first aid training into our community for parents and various other members of our community to participate. We're doing a number of restorative practices training to bring that into our school buildings to work on addressing when a student is feel harmed by another student or there's an issue going on in the building. Those students try to work those things out. Move This World, that people are familiar with at the elementary level, we're continuing to fund. BARC for schools, I don't know if folks are familiar here with BARC, but BARC is an early warning system that we have in place to track student statements made in our Office 365 process. And we catch a number of things that way. We actually, a month ago, caught an actively suicidal student, was able to make an appropriate referral and get that student to the hospital. So we were very happy for that, and actually one of our school principals deserves the credit for that, who caught that at 2 in the morning. The consortium grant, so you've probably heard about the grant funds that have been given to a number of our nonprofits in the area or nationally. And we had 5 different letters that we wrote in support. 4 of those organizations were supported with quite a bit of money, actually. So Hazel Health, everyone probably here has heard of that, where they're providing telemental health services at our secondary schools. We're now rolling it into our elementaries, and that has already kicked off, both for parents and outside of school as well as in the school environment. Center for Children, we're currently working with them on getting us more personnel in the school buildings, as well as doing some training with our existing staff. Mental Health Association of Maryland, Teen Mental Health First Aid. It's a little different than adult and child mental health first aid, and that's to roll it out into a school building and work actually with students to teach them mental health first aid so they can work with the rest of the students in the school building. And then a small portion of that is Boys and Girls Club of Southern Maryland, which is in 2 of our schools for after-school programming. You can see here behavioral health services provided by staff. The one piece that's kind of different than previous years is student services. We've added behavioral health clinicians who provide therapeutic counseling services in addition to the other services that are provided. And what do? Well, we are being asked to do more and more on the mental health side to meet the needs of our students. As folks are familiar in the community, the demand has increased and the supply of available providers in the community has shrunk. And many providers aren't necessarily even taking the insurance of parents when they want to seek out the services for their children and teenagers. So we are doing more and more to try to meet that need. So we've done that not only through training for our existing staff, but also our connection to outside agencies. And you can see Tri-County, Center for Children, Hazel Health, Expanding Horizons.
So that all said, so what are we doing to prevent, reduce, address? And so we do have just a few things that we'll share. We're not able to share everything, but just a bulleted list as we planned this presentation did we come up with. And so there is an increase in the referrals that we are sending to the Charles County Mediation Service that works out of CSM. We continue our partnerships with student mentor groups. Of course, we encourage a lot of the trainings and some of those that you heard Dr. Blanchard talk about, restorative practices, PBIS-based instruction, of course, that's our tier one almost, social emotional learning lessons, trauma-informed care. And then there is the annual convening of our Code of Student Conduct Committee. So that is a committee that initially, in years past, it used to be just a few of us here at the central office who would get together and review the document. And so that committee has expanded to include the folks you see here, teachers, students, school-based administrators, and of course, central office folks, union leaders are part of that. And we have several meetings throughout the spring here. We've had our first one a week or so ago. And so, and again, our charge is really just to look at the document to determine if there are some revisions that we want to recommend for the next edition coming following school year. So for our students, how to avoid personal experience with the Code of Conduct. Again, 79% of our students have no issues with this, and even a few more, I think the 12%, they're usually one and dones. And so for the vast majority, our students are doing well in this area, but a few things that we didn't mind noting as far as things that students can do to help themselves, of course, is to follow the school-wide rules, to recognize when things are going wrong and take proactive measures, self-advocate, let someone know when there are some challenges that are coming their way. And then when something does go wrong, take ownership, responsibility. That's the way we're going to learn from it. When adults are trying to assist and support, recognize that for what it is and comply. Don't make the situation worse, is what we say to students. And we get that that's hard when you're in the moment. So we are always encouraging the preventative kinds of thoughts and proactive measures that can be taken. But then when something goes wrong, learn from past mistakes, avoid choices, and do better. Our thing is to start each day with the goal of making it better than the day before. What to expect, the application of the Code of Conduct moving forward. So the committee will finish their work. We have 3 sessions left where the committee will continue looking at the document. We will share it with the administrators. The administrators will also receive professional learning this summer at the Ronald G. Cunningham Leadership Institute, where they will, again, just be coached up on anything that's new or different from the Code of Conduct, and then how and what we expect regarding consistent application of that document across schools. Of course, reviewing the document with students upon their return, making sure that families get it, monitoring it throughout the year, and then collecting data throughout the year so that we can determine if we need to, or what we need to consider changing when we go back to taking a look at it next year. That's an annual kind of thing for us, bringing the committee together. So thank you for your time on the report, and Board Chair Morley, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dones, Dr. Blanchard. All right, I see a few hands. I'm not sure who was first. Was it Ms. Smith? Okay, go ahead, Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Chair Morley. And thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. I know this is something the community has absolutely been interested in terms of our discipline and sort of where we stand.
Yeah.
So appreciate sharing the good, the bad, the ugly. Just a few questions for you. I want to give space for my colleagues to ask their questions as well. On slide 2, you reference calibrating efforts to ensure positive progress. Last bullet on slide 2. Just curious sort of what that calibration looks like across our schools. Of course, we know parents are constantly communicating with one another. So seeing different things happening in different places, what does that calibration look like between schools?
So that goes in line with the professional learning that we do with administrators. And we did a version of this last summer as well. And so really taking all of the administrators through some scenarios that happen across all of our schools and really unpacking them, having them to do an exercise where they are given their feedback on how they would handle it and why. And then we're giving our feedback on things that we agree with and things that maybe they should consider doing differently. So we have a whole presentation that we do with all of our administrators, and again, giving them different scenarios that we have encountered and experienced across all schools and so at all levels, and so that everybody kind of gets on the same page with, you know, what the expectation is with how it should be handled. Of course, every situation is a little bit unique, but generally we got to have a base of, you know, how we should approach these matters, and so that's our time and that's what we do during that time to calibrate.
Okay, thank you. My other question is on slide 17, it was referenced that this is data from surveys that are given to students. I'm curious if the survey is only like a Likert scale. Does it have like open response questions? Because I'd be curious if students were able to explain what led to kind of the higher perception of the school climate. Like what are they seeing?
It's more qualitative data. No, there's not like a piece where they're able to add in. It's really just responding with, because it's a standardized assessment in essence, so it's just responding with their score in each individual area based upon specific questions that they're providing.
I'd be curious if there was some like youth participatory action research where like students at a school or across schools would have the opportunity to take some of these challenges and figure out like what could be better done, like from their vantage point. I mean, obviously they're the customers. They see it from a different perspective than we do. Like what could be done from their perspective to improve the school climate and to reduce some of these issues that we're continuing to see. So just a plug, Dr. Navarro, perhaps something in the future we can look into. I just have two more questions. I guess this kind of bleeds into my other question, which is more so like what are students saying they want to see, but we don't necessarily have that level of data.
Well, not so much in this, but there is a students are invited to participate on the Code of Conduct Committee, and so our experience with that last year was that they really sort of led the charge on the major change that we had in the Code of Conduct regarding dress code last year. And oddly enough, by the way, the data on that, we didn't show it, but has gone way down as far as violations, dress code violations. We were a little bit surprised how far down they went. They were like 300 something to maybe 68 or something like that. Now, that's not to say that we don't still have some concerns there that we may talk about, you know, in the committee. But just to get back to the point, you know, student voice is important, and so we think that's a good place for them to be involved in the revision of the Code of Conduct.
Certainly. And I know that Ms. Perkins has been invested in sort of getting to different schools and having conversations with her peers across the county. Perhaps this is a topic that she can raise as she continues to do that outreach and engagement. My last question was around, it was noted, Mr. Blanchard, that you said the school counselor population has decreased. There's a demand, but the professionals just aren't there. I'm curious if we've explored social workers. They too have kind of the background to be able to offer one-to-one therapy, to be able to diagnose and offer supports and services and kind of guide students and families to services similar to a counselor. So I'm just curious if that's been explored.
Yes. So a couple of different things that we're looking at, one of which is the behavioral health clinician that we're talking about actually is a social worker. And that was an MOU we developed with the Department of Health 2 years ago. The issue is that money is ending at the end of June, so we're absorbing that position in other ways. In addition, what we're looking at is are there ways we can work with that school counselor component and put that into a social work kind of position. One of the challenges is social workers are not a certified position through the state, right? So we have to find ways of funding that position as well. So those are different things that we're looking at to creatively try to address, but we agree that that is an area we need to explore more.
Perhaps a personnel share with our, what's it called, a social service agency? Yep. So just thinking creatively, and I know there's two of us who have background in social work, so.
Great.
All right.
Hey, send your friends our way.
Send your friends, absolutely. Thank you, that's my time. Those are my questions.
Ms. Samisha Thomas and Ms. Bella Washington.
Thank you, Chairperson Morley. this is so apropos that this comes right after we had a budget discussion that I just noted, where I was a little bit saddened to see that we have some areas where our neediest students who need to be social and emotionally well. And then you had on slide 15, students must be healthy to be educated and educated to be healthy, right? So I do think this is appropriate. To piggyback off of Ms. Smith's point, I was just at a job fair at Bowie State University where I was helping to recruit with some of Ms. Major's staff, and the social workers had a job fair, and I thought, wow, we could, a lot of kids were saying, do you have internships, right? And as a social worker, as part of that BSW, you need to do an internship. Perhaps we could take some young people to help young people.
Right.
Just an idea, right? For us to, innovatively find some students. It could be free because it's an internship. We don't have to pay them, not necessarily, but you get credit towards their BSW, right? As a degreed social worker, I think that may be an option. But I also had some questions about, on slide 10, one of the things that I have a question about is the consistency that these infractions are handled within the schools, right? Because when we have these variations, I know we have this kind of what's major, what's minor, and while that may be structured, whether or not the students, the academic professionals and or counselors that are dealing with students, if we feel like it's applied unilaterally across the schools, right? I don't know that that's the case. I don't even know if you have data, but that is something that I would be interested in, just like understanding more about that. And the reason being is the only thing that I can make it analogous to is we see policing in our communities, and we know that some communities are over-policed more than others. So I wouldn't say that we have that in our schools, that, some students are, being treated differently than others. I would not make that leap. But I would just like to say, for the greater good of all of our students, I would like to make sure that there's equity about the way the violations are applied and the way students are feeling that they're treated. And so that brings me to, I think, another point Ms. Smith made is getting the student's voice. When I was at the NSBA conference, I attended a presentation done by a 16-year-old. And this presentation was all about the student's voice. She gave a great presentation about how in their school district they develop forums for students to speak out. And one of the participants said, when students are asked to speak out, the students you often hear from are the students that are engaged. But the students that are often impacted by the decisions are the ones that are not engaged. They're the ones that are getting in trouble are the ones that's like, go to a meeting with administrators, absolutely not, right? And so I wanted to make sure that when we're collecting student voice, even if it's you in the principal's office again, okay, let's fill out this survey, It's kind of like we do in HR, right? We survey the people that are leaving, right as they're leaving, because we want to know why you didn't stay, right? And so I just want to make sure that we are doing our due diligence with making sure that we're collecting data from the students that, are finding themselves having that, those kind of, those encounters, right?
The ones who've had the most experience,
Right.
personal experience.
Because I do think they're the ones that can give us some really enriched quality feedback. Like, I'm trying not to get in trouble, but, I really do think, and even if it's, to your point, qualitative, perhaps we can find some way to reach those students because those are the ones that encounter and have the most experience. So I would just like to add that. And then my last point, I don't want to take too much from my other colleagues. Slide 24, which I like this. Like, I think this is great, right? On slide 24, how do you stay out of trouble, right? I really like this, and I would like a personal plug to work with Ms. Perkins. Let's make this a TikTok, right? Let's try to make this a PSA for kids, right? If we find a way to reach the students where they are, a TikTok or a PSA like, look, how do you stay out of trouble? Avoid it. If we could find a way, because my kids told me the other day, like, Facebook is for old people, Mom, and they're not going to read this, right? But if it's a TikTok, we could even do a challenge, like a bunch of student government, like who has the best TikTok on how to stay out of trouble. I just think we have to continue to find ways to engage our students where they are. We need to meet them where they are, and then, find ways to empower them to take responsibility for their own behavior. So I just thought, could be cool. We gotta, I don't think we have any TikToks yet. This could be our introduction to TikTok for, you know.
And say, look, before it gets banned.
TikToking.
While we still have it.
But I did really like this, and you know, a lot of times we write things, they're for us, right? And I feel like this is really great information, but I feel like it's, to borrow from the legal word, it's legalese, it's adultese. Let's like put it in kids' terms, or not kids, the youth's terms, like, you know, make it teenies and see if we can get it, you know, get some teenies and see if we can get some traction there with, you know, just encouraging kids to have eyes on, like, you want to stay out of trouble, here's how, and engage them in a different way. So that's just my points. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Bella Washington.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Board Member Shamisha. That was great. You put me right into my thought what I was going to ask. But first I want to ask about the survey. How about surveying our youth in our school when they first get to school, the January when they come back, and in May, and ask them the questions that we want to know. How can we help you to behave? What do it take? What is the issue that you're having? How can we help? Ask those pertinent questions to them. They'll give you the answer if we ask. And that's what we can build our data for. And we build that data from there, right? So we'll be able to answer those questions in a policy that's on their level so they can definitely understand what they're supposed to do and what they don't supposed to do. Because when you exclude it from the whole process, especially if you're a child that, you know, gets in trouble, I'm not gonna amount to nothing. I'm not gonna do anything, so I'm not gonna behave. And we wanna change that narrative. So we gotta include them into the whole philosophy. And I think that you will get a lot of information from there. And then the youth committee, these are these students in your school that do not get in trouble. They are approachable, they active, they can get together. And if you see a child struggling, at lunchtime, you're gonna go talk to the youth committee. Kids talk to kids, just like Ms. Thomas said. They won't talk to us, but they will talk amongst themselves. But the youth committee can bring you back that information so we can put some action in place to help them. And so that's the kind of things that we need for the youth now, because they're not like when we grew up, where, you know, we had the fear of God in us, which was mom and dad at home. So, you know, that doesn't work anymore. So now we have to be more creative into making sure we bring them into the fold. And yoga for behavior problems. We went to New Orleans, like my colleague said, and we went to the school where they, instead of punishing them, and that discipline went way down, they sent them to the yoga class that's in the gym. They go in there and take off all that energy, do yoga, have a good time, and they say, okay, I'm ready to go back and learn. Go back to class. Instead of sending them to the office, they send them to yoga class. And I think that is something that when kids do not know how to sit down, they need to get that energy. And yeah, we got to understand, kids are not designed to sit down all day. Grown-ups are not designed to sit down all day. So we can't expect this from our children. So we got to put something in play for those kids that really cannot, but they are learning, but they just can't sit there to learn it. So you give them an avenue to go get that energy out and then come back and learn, because that's a better way of us making sure that every child succeeds. And then my last question is, I know we are a shortage of psychologists. Have we ever thought about going, because I did a search on psychologists in our area. Can we contract with the already psychologists in the area? So what they're doing is they're still at their office working, and they got it's like a lot of them. They can contract with them, and they can come in at different times. So when you need them, so that will give you some leeway, because I'm telling you, they're not leaving their jobs to come work for the schools because of the money. You see the money different, and I see the money different.
There's the money difference.
So what you do is you contract them, and they'll come and work in the schools and be able to give the child the needs that they need and stuff. So that's a great way of utilizing. So what we're doing is we're just utilizing what's already out there, and we all working together for a common cause, instead of having a parent that's going, saying, I'm just gonna go to the doctor and you just go sit with him. But when we can use the whole system to even help our students out. So that's the way we need to think outside the box, and maybe that's where we can get some people. Because I know some of them, and they said, well, the school ain't never asked us. And I said, well, have you asked the school? So, you know, just to get the talking going so you can see if that's something that the school can actually do. And the plan, the discipline, this is for Dr. Navarro. And you know, we talked about this when I went to the alternative school in New Orleans. They had a discipline plan that every school followed. No one got a chance, no one could deviate from that. And it brought their numbers down because they decided the consequence for the child. And the only thing the school had to do was look, and that's what you're given. That's exactly what you're given. You do not deviate from that. Because I do truly believe when you put that into the school individually, some people are harder than others are. And they might say, I might think it was a little thing and I can correct that. Other people, no, I'm gonna give you this. So it makes a lot of sense if your discipline action plan for all the schools are the same. Because if it's the same, we'll know true data. We don't really know true data because personality, everything gets involved in that. And we know that is subjective, right? So if you make one plan where everybody's doing the same, and I know you want people to have power and all this stuff, but when you come to my child, no, I don't want that. I want every child to be able to be treated the same, and the way the schools can make it be done is we can put a plan in where every school will have to use that same plan. So there's no, it's nothing to even think about. You look and see what they had, and boom, that's it. Right. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, Ms. Warren?
So, this topic is really near and dear to me. So I'm going to just say I have a few comments and questions. So my first question is based on slide 19, where you listed the additional initiatives.
Yes.
You mentioned restorative practices, Move This World, not Bark for Schools. I don't want to include that one, but you mentioned, somebody else said, I think Dr. Jones, you mentioned that we have PBIS. My question is, are all three of them being used in the schools? Dr. Navarro, this is probably a conversation that I'm going to have with you one of these days, but like, it's my understanding when I met with Mr. Lowndes and his team a while back, that the principals get to choose which initiative, if or all, that they want to use. When I think of school climate, I think of when you walk into school and you have certain school values, there's just a systematic culture, which is something different. You got the school climate, school culture in the school. So I guess what I'm getting at is what's being done. I know at the Move This World is at the elementary level, right? What's at the middle school level and what's at the high school level? I know PBIS is also in elementary as well, probably in middle school and maybe in high school. Can you just clarify that for me?
Sure. Yeah, so I can tell you that the PBIS is in all of our elementary schools, many of our secondary, I won't say all of our secondary, but that is basically, it's the foundation of our tier 1 sort of behavior plan, school-wide rules for everybody. And to be looked at from the accentuate the positive aspects, so not necessarily looking to punish, but rather looking to reward or at least recognize for doing better, to encourage that behavior while at the same time discouraging the negative behaviors. And so that's sort of the basis of PBIS. And so all of our schools are PBIS schools. But within that, within each building, there's a matrix that the schools have that falls in line with the code of conduct. So the code of conduct has, of course, the definitions and the rules and guidelines, and then the levels of response or the consequences at the end. And so schools have a matrix that is aligned with the code of conduct. So it can't go beyond that, but it's aligned with the code of conduct in every school. And so very much, most of their plans look almost exactly the same as the code of conduct, because that's okay. But there are some nuances to what schools' matrix may look like. The number of warnings that some children may get in some schools or some classrooms. Some of those may look a little different. Every classroom teacher has their own set of rules within their class that can't go beyond what the code of conduct does, but has to be aligned with the school-wide matrix. And so every school has, the code of conduct is the base.
Right. Okay.
And for the whole district. And then in the buildings, there are matrices that align with the code of conduct. So their own set of guidelines and rules that align with the code of conduct. And then in each classroom, many classrooms, they have something that might be more specific to their rooms, but again, all aligned to the school matrix, the code of conduct. So it's kind of how that works, but some of the initiatives here that you talked about, whether they are in every school or schools have to use them or whether they do or don't. Restorative practices, all of these are encouraged. Restorative practices, yes, they are encouraged. Many of our schools, at one point we were working to get all of our schools trained in restorative practice, but it's a very specific training, and so that was a challenge to get everybody trained. But over the course of time, I'd say probably the vast majority of our schools have the administrators or staff members in that building have had training on restorative practices, and they use them regularly. They Move This World, that is, of course, at elementary level. The base is at the middle school level. Again, interventions that are used as needed, but certainly the schools have all of these resources available to them to bring in, or certain staff in their buildings, their counselors or their PPWs or school psychologists, those folks in the buildings, and many of the teachers have these at their arsenal, so that the resources are available to them.
I think, well, thank you for that. I think in my mind, like you said, the code of conduct is across the school district. In my mind, I'm thinking just the consistency of these good programs, initiatives being implemented. Like when I look at Castle's website and, SEL, they have a systematic implementation plan. Like it would just, and it would go across the whole district and every school to, Ms. Butler Washington's point, when we were at the alternative school, they talked about every school did the same thing. And while I know schools like to be different, that's fine, but when it comes to setting a certain climate, I just think it would help just reduce. I'm glad to see that the numbers haven't changed too much, but just I just think that consistency of of a particular method would help just make the schools better, even better. My next question. So as far as principals, because I know they run the school, do they attend the Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development, ASCD? They had a conference this year in DC. Did we attend that? Did anybody attend that from our?
I think we may have had a couple of administrators that may have went, but they aren't required to go. To that particular conference, but administrators are not shy about letting us know when there's something out there that they want to go to. I mean, there's a conference going on everywhere all the time, so they can't do it all. But when they do find something that is valuable to their professional growth, we certainly encourage it. They have a budget that can a lot of times support some of their conferences. I won't say it's a huge budget, but they have a line item in their budget for professional development, so they can use some of those funds to go to conferences. So some of ours may have went. I know we've had some that go to the NAESP conference or the MAESP conference. I'm not sure. I sort of think I remember reading, signing off on something about the SCD conference, but so there have been years where we absolutely have had folks go to that particular conference.
Yeah,
we
no, I'm
encourage-
sure. I was just curious. I'm like, oh, it's in DC, yay! You know, it's close to our backyard. And I know we talk a lot about the teachers, which are important as well. But sometimes I know I haven't talked about the principals getting the professional development they need, and just for their mental health and well-being as well. And then my last statement or question, you know how in the I think in your strategic plan, we talked about the PLCs among, I think it was more so among teachers and educators. Do we have like something like that for principals? Like, is there like a group of principals that like maybe get together and, I don't know, do PLC, professional learning type?
So PLT, we have our professional learning teams. We
Okay.
have been working with these last couple of years, and our principals have been involved in those with their school teams. But separate from those, the principals have been put into small cohort groups themselves that our office works directly with. Those groups, we break up into groups and work with them on the same kinds of professional development opportunities for the principals. So yes, they have the groups that we work with them in, and some of them have formed their own cohort groups where they do that. They come together every so often. The middle school group used to, for example, meet every principals meeting. They would meet before our meeting early in the morning, and so they form their own cohort groups for sure, and then we have some that we have set that we are a part of with the principals as well.
Yeah, because I'm just asking because they do lead the schools, so that has to do everything with the climate, the vision that they have for the schools, and then with the switching of the different principals going to different schools, how they're acclimated to that climate. Do they come in and bring, their own little toolkit or whatever? So those are my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Kramer and then Ms. Perkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Jones and Dr. Blanchard, for this very detailed presentation. Really appreciate it. A couple of questions I have. So do we have data or do we collect data and disaggregate it by school? So I know we have like the levels, so we have like elementary, middle, high. Do you disaggregate it by school at all?
We do have that data available, yes. And
Okay.
and we look at that. As a matter of fact, in order to put this presentation together, we looked at a lot of individual school data, and some data that wasn't clean, we had to get them to clean it up so we could take a look at this.
Gotcha. Okay, so just curious about that and about trends that you might see, because, we know that whereas there are incidents across the county, there are certain schools that may struggle with certain types of behaviors, maybe more than others, or certain conflicts, more than others. And I'm just a big fan of collaboration, right? And so during those principal meetings and things like that, feel like that data would be helpful to share, one, and two, so that principals and administrators can kind of bounce ideas off of each other. So, for example, and I'm just throwing out there, like, okay, I'm not even going to use names. High school A, has had a major problem with fights, this year, and high school B, its numbers are significantly lower. Hey, what are you doing, principal, at high school B? Maybe, we can take some of those ideas, to help kind of reduce some of the issues that we're seeing at our school. Sort of how you talked about how you sort of calibrate the discipline matrix and make sure that kind of everybody's doing something similar, or make sure that the appropriate measures are taken in most cases. So something like that, because I feel like different schools struggle with different things, and so they may be able to help each other. I know they share other things about whatever it is, that goes on across the school and how they're solving different problems and coming up with different solutions. So I feel like if that data was shared, with the principals, then they would be able to sort of help each other, like, hey, how did you only have 6 incidents last month? You know what I mean? Tell me what you're doing, basically. So just want to make sure that data is available so that, not only are we being transparent with the public, but making sure that our leaders know who's doing something that's working, and I think across the county and all, not just with discipline situations, but Certain schools are doing well, with improving their reading scores. So make sure we're sharing that information with kind of what interventions and strategies that they're doing that maybe another school hasn't thought of. We have great leaders who have a lot of different innovative ideas. And so when I visit schools, that's something I always take away is unique things that each principal is doing with their own school. And I'm like, did you tell your peers? Do you tell your colleagues about this? Because this is a great idea. For example, like the calming room at Westlake. And now I've heard that it's been sort of starting to spread across the county in different schools, and that's a great thing. So just for example, so I just wanted to find out if that data was available and if we're sharing it, so they can use it as an opportunity.
Yeah, so lots of sharing among the principals in that way, but that's a very specific conversation that perhaps hasn't been had enough as far as looking at that sharing their actual data with each other and saying, hey, yours is better than mine, what are you doing?
Right.
To that level, we probably haven't had enough of those conversations, but very comfortable with sharing in general, but I'm taking this down. So.
Okay, appreciate that. And just one other, this is sort of kind of a theme. A lot of my colleagues have brought up something that was sort of centered around utilizing our youth, right, to help us solve problems. So there's a lot of data around peer mediation. And I know we've kind of talked about it briefly in the past. Are we utilizing any type of peer mediation sort of cohorts in the county at all? And if not, are we looking into doing that?
Yeah, so there's at least one school that I can think of that does it very systematically, where they've had the kids trained in the specific peer mediation protocol, and they do a really nice job with it. I'm not sure that that's a widespread kind of thing. Certainly there have been conversations where we've talked about it, and encouraged it to be shared. But has it spread across many schools? I'm not 100% on that. I'd venture to say no, because I think I would have heard about it.
Okay.
But I've heard it and seen about it in one particular school who
Okay.
does it really
It's just something I think we should consider and maybe just share, again, those ideas with not only just peer mediation within the school, so like within high school, but utilizing, say, the middle schoolers to help with elementary kids who have conflicts and things like that, and then maybe high school with their, middle school counterparts, because it teaches so many things, right? So while they're helping someone else, they're helping other students to resolve their conflicts, they're developing those skills themselves, and so I think that could pay us back in so many ways. And it also helps the students take ownership of some of the issues, right? To say, hey, we want our schools to be safe places, and we want to be able to help solve some of these problems so that we can have better school environments. Because none of them, they don't want to lose privileges. A lot of times in high school, they lose privileges. They lose their lunchtime if they had too many conflicts, too many issues, right? So they don't want that. So it's just something I really would like to see us utilize more if possible. And those are my comments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Perkins?
I just wanted to bring up a few quick things. I am going to speak on what Ms. Thomas said, and Ms. Creamer actually brought up one of my points was the calm room. For instance, I love that room. That room is amazing. But I do think that it's very beneficial because it kind of lets you like get a break, kind of just like cool down, or if you just need a second. So I think that room is very beneficial. And they also have it set up for, at least I know at my school, Westlake, they have different activities and things in there that you could do, or you could just sit in there with the lights off and relax. They set a timer for 10 minutes, and then after those 10 minutes, they ask you like, okay, are you okay? How are you doing? Or like, do you need to go see a counselor? And I think, honestly, if it's possible, I think that's something that we should expand even in elementary and middle school and high schools, because, even like the younger kids, like Ms. Creamer mentioned, sometimes they struggle, sometimes they get frustrated or they get into conflicts or whatever. Even though they're smaller, those things still happen. Same thing with middle school. So I think that would be very beneficial for students to kind of have like an outlet, and then they also have the resources, like if it's something deeper that they couldn't get over in those 10 minutes, they're able to go talk to their counselor and get to the root of the issue. And then to what Ms. Thomas said. So what Ms. Thomas said, I think the TikTok and the Instagram TikTok and Instagram would be a really good idea. There's actually a lot of TikTok trends that we would be able to like do to kind of like switch it to what you were saying or whatever. So like, for example, my old Avid class, we were having like an Avid battle between all the Avid classes or whatever. So we were saying like who could make the best TikTok with the trends that were going around at that time. So one of them, it's like a trend that it, for example, so we were like, we're an Avid, like of course we have an organized binder, or like we're an Avid, of course we do a TRF every Tuesday and Thursday. So we would be able, I think we would be able to switch that in the narrative that you were saying, and even do it with high school and middle school, because most high schools and some middle schools, but mostly high schools already have like Instagram pages and stuff like that. So as long as it's ran by an adult, I would say, not necessarily having a child run that. But as long as it's ran by an adult or whatever, I think we would be able to like spread the word and like people would see it. Because I'm gonna be honest, we're on TikTok and Instagram all day. Those, if we go into our settings, those are the apps that we use the most.
Just need a good hashtag, right?
Yeah, a good hashtag, and then just having the yeah, and just having that audience, especially.
Yes. So I'm hearing a board-wide TikTok challenge. Is that the takeaway?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that works too.
I'll do it.
Yeah, including the schools, because like I said, a lot of them have their own like pages or whatever, so it wouldn't be like specifically for the board, but it would be for like each school, because most students follow their school's page. And even maybe using those students that Ms. Thomas was talking about or whatever, because some students that may have done some things in the past weren't on the best behavior. Some of them have changed. Majority of them have changed. So even saying like, hey, I used to be one of these students, but now I'm better, or now I'm a straight A student, or like, just different things. So I think that's a really good idea. But that's all I had.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Hancock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to be very brief. Thank you, Dr. Jones. Thank you, Dr. Blanchard. This is an issue I think it's very important to a lot of us, or all of us, and it's something that's very important to me. And I just wanted to point out a level of improvement that really stands out to me. Even though we are up, I guess a little less than 800 violations as a whole compared to last year, something that really sticks out to me, and I'm not that surprised because I can hear it in the community, is the massive drop in percentage of violations in middle school. It's huge.
Yeah.
We're for the first time in at least the last 3 years, not that it's good, but there's more violations in elementary school than middle school. So the question I ask is, what have we done to make that change? Because something has changed. And I think that you're going to see that progression as those students advance into high school. Mm-hmm. You're going to see that percentage drop down. Mm-hmm. And I think whatever we have done, we need to, number one, keep doing, and then try to expand upon that in our high school and maybe even as early as elementary school. But something has changed.
Can I just add to that thing? I think one of the things that was instituted, I think probably with much more fidelity, was the base survey, asking kids. I think that was instituted a lot more with fidelity at the middle schools. And so when you are surveying someone and you're sitting around and looking at how they responded, as a group of adults, you're having conversations on, our Summers kids are telling us this, and so what are we gonna do about it? And so it ignites, it ignites sort of a follow-up from our staff. So I was looking at that data, it's so interesting that you saw it as well, because we have been talking a lot about the middle school transition, especially when our kids came back from COVID. And I do think in the middle schools, there have been poignant conversations. And I believe that the school where you're talking about peer-to-peer is a middle school that has finalized it. And I do think there's been a lot of discussion, and kudos to our middle school staff on unpacking that very difficult, fast developmental age anyways of kids, and grabbing them there, because I do think the base, if I remember correctly, the base was better implemented in middle school than it was across all high schools.
Bless you.
And then we had couple of middle schools that did restorative circles, because I heard it from my own kids coming home talking about restorative circles. We had more schools think of ways to incentivize PBIS, so a lot more sneaker dances and kinds and PBIS things. So I think it's not one thing. It's the braiding of having our staff unpack this. I also just want to mention, when we're talking about PBIS, because we have a Lackey teacher sitting in the back, when we went to observe Lackey, one of the things that the staff was working on was being positive with their kids at the high school level. And PBIS is thought of for the little kids. Let's be positive and anything. And one of the things that we went, because we did these observations and talked to folks about this, we don't just do instructional rounds, we also talk about school climate. And I did the walk through the high schools, was this whole thing around, we're gonna be positive with our students. And I just think that has a huge impact. When the staff grab a program that they own and say, we're all gonna do this together, I think that has a lot of leverage. So there's a lot of programs sometimes, but the reason we offer some options is because it's really the staff in the school that make it or break it. We are summarizing stuff, but this is the work of daily educators and IAs and building service workers and secretaries. Everybody's sort of tuned in. And I really do think it was interesting. They were working with, apps and so forth that they could create for kids to, again, engage in a positive manner. So I do think the middle schools, though, kudos to the middle schools, have really pushed the envelope of braiding multiple ways to engage their kids a lot more at a very developmentally confusing and lots of sort of things, but it's a perfect time to double down on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, did you want to say something, Ms. Thomas?
Thank you, Mr. Jones. My question is, I see that where the superintendent suspensions and the out-of-school suspensions, how much participation do you get from the parents when this is happening and trying to get these kids back in school and on the right path? Are you getting a lot of?
Well, with the suspensions, the parents are required to have the disposition conference with the student prior to them returning to school. So there, obviously there's going to be some communication with the family when they're suspended out, but then when they're returning back, there's supposed to be a meeting that's held between the administrators and the family to really just, talk through. Not to belabor the issue, but to talk through and be sure that they really understood what the issue was and how we're going to moving forward. So that's one of those things that's non-negotiable, that families have to be involved. And then in the hearing process for those students who are suspended to the superintendent, the family is a part of that as well. We don't do the hearings without the families.
So you're getting a good outcome from the parents working with them as far as suspension with the kid?
Yeah, I'd say we are really high percentage with getting their participation. Now, it's not always happy participation. Let's face it, they're there for not good reasons. So, and they a lot of times will let us know that. But they're there, and so passion for your children's allowed. We get it. They're there, and we talk it through, and we work it through and move on. But yeah, we get good participation rate, and we sort of demand that. So.
I guess my other question is, because I remember I was saying I didn't want them just to go home and sit home, look at TV and stuff. Do you have some kind of program or something they have to do, or some kind of project that they have to bring back to prove that they
for
learned?
an ordinary suspension, after 3 days, they're required, for 3 or more days, they're required to have work that's sent home, schoolwork for them to do. If you're looking at a suspension to the superintendent, the hearing officer, as a part of her disposition, will sometimes give assignments. So it might be a research paper, it might be an essay or something that comes along with the rest of whatever that disposition or that consequence is, which many times come from the hearing table, is sent to a student sent to the alternative center for 45 days. So it's all kind of a part of that. But there are lots of things. Sometimes, depending on what it is, they might get assigned to a drug cessation class or something, or have to go to teen court and be a part of that process. So the hearing officer can give lots of different things there, and she does a nice job with that as far as doing what makes sense based on the violation. But sometimes, yes, different assignments to help, students do some research on whatever that matter is, that comes along as a part of it as well.
Okay, thank you.
And can I just put a plug in about teen court, because Dr. Jones and I were sitting together at teen court. We went to visit about 3 weeks ago. And if the board members have never experienced teen court, it's an important thing to talk about consequences, and it's peers that are able to talk about the consequences that their peers are going to have to do. And it's a lot. Sometimes I'm like, whoa, that's a lot that they give to do. But teen court is actually, I would say, a jewel in this county. It is, and I think it's very much, our hearing officer sometimes refers a lot of our students for it, and we have students that were sitting as jury members who were formerly part of teen court, now returning to get their SSL hours as teen court. So it's not just students who maybe had never had any interaction with the code of conduct, it's students who actually have gone through teen court and come back and do this work because they see the impact it had for them. So I just want to do a quick shout out to our sheriff's office. It's an incredibly strong program.
And they take it seriously, too.
And
Yeah.
yes, it's very serious. They make you turn off your cell phone and everything, so.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And if the jury knows some of the kids, they put you out the jury, say, no,
Yeah, they
you.
do. They take it very seriously.
Yes.
Right.
Well, if I could make a couple of closing points, and then we'll move to our action items. I had several comments that I wanted to make, but I'll abbreviate around, and in lieu of teen court, I actually would prefer to see peer court. And I proposed this and talked about this last month, or actually maybe earlier this month, as a result of NSBA. What I liked about it is, because my daughter has served on teen court as part of the jury, but of course, you're already in the system at that point. That's at the circuit court. That's run through the sheriff's office. Peer court would be run with us. CCPS would be the originator. They would come here, so they could have the jury sitting here at Starkey rather than in a circuit court, which is incredibly intimidating. You've already had an arrest. You already have some kind of record. And also, the school system that demonstrated actually is based out of Utah. They have about 34,000 students. I took a lot of notes. Like, this is my jam, because I've been a mediator for almost as long as I've been an attorney, so maybe 20 years, give or take. Toddler, obviously. But but what I like about it, obviously, thank you, it can start as young. The youngest they had was 3rd grade, but it can also be designed to incorporate elementary school students. And that piece really spoke to me, because then you're capturing these students young, and they understand young. And the key part of the restorative practice, of course, is the restorative piece. So you don't just go back into the classroom without making amends with the person that you offended, with whether it's the faculty, whether it's another student. And also a big plug, because I used to work at community mediation in Montgomery County. Our community mediation offers a lot of these services for free. They often get a lot of grant money, and so we should look into expanding whatever relationship we have with them, because the community conferencing circles are incredibly powerful. That brings together the students and their parents, and you have that conversation, and you understand. As I'm going to beat this drum, you have to understand the why of the behavior. You can't just punish, your way out of anything. You have to understand why that student did what they did, so that they understand why they never should do it again. And one of the things that really appealed to me with the Utah school system is that, in general, their rate of recidivism dropped considerably. And that, to me, is the real goal of what we're doing, is that this student understands why they did what they did. They understand why they should never do it again. And then they themselves can go forward and help another student. So to piggyback on what Dr. Navarro said, we need a multi-tier approach. We need peer mediators, and we need peer court. And for some, we still do need teen court. And the peer court, they candidly run with 2 people. Students can get some academic credit depending on the number of hours that you do. So there's a lot of different ways to think outside the box where, in light of our current, financial situation, which is a little dire, I'm not making light of it at all. It's just thinking of ways that we can, expand what we're doing without also adding to the budget, because it has to be sustainable. So I wanted to talk about that. Also, something else Dr. Navarro talked about, the exchange of ideas. It made me think about when we had the state of the schools, and I love that she specifically pointed out, Teacher Smith, to use Ms. Smith, Teacher Smith is crushing it at X, Y, and Z elementary. What are you doing, Teacher Smith? You can kind of become the gold standard. So I think those are the types of things that we need to do, because I'm sure that teacher felt great to hear their name called, to have their class used as an example, and that's another free way that we can highlight a lot of the excellent work that is already being done in our schools. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to have those conversations. Also, I love that, and this may, of course, been coincidence, but we'll take full credit on the board. We talked about how we would like to see data monthly. We spent a lot of time talking about that and understanding why that's so crucial, NSBA, just to keep reiterating it to parents so that they understand that we're aware of what the challenges are. We're not running from it. Even when it doesn't look pretty, we're still going to address it head on, because that's why we're elected, is to challenge, to tackle these tough issues. And so thank you for this. Again, we're going to take full credit, but I'm sure you've been working on this for quite some time. And I love the TikTok idea. Thank you for that, because that relates to something we heard about at the Cube Luncheon, that there is data that supports meeting students where they are, relating to them in a way that excites them, that challenges them, that makes them want to engage back. Because a lot of times, many of these problems can be solved or at least improved by student input. And so I think if we're reaching them in a way that engages them, I think you're going to see a lot more people. You make it cool to want to, follow the rules and to want to, help solve the problems, because, give or take, depending how old they are, when they graduate in 10 years and they either become our teachers or business leaders or whatever they do, this is the next generation. So we can't ever lose sight of that. So, and also the positive reinforcement. We talked a lot about that as well. So thank you all. One final thought about the student surveys. I had mentioned this last month. Just want to be mindful of who we're surveying and how we're surveying them. If I remember correctly, I think you talked about a sample, and we don't necessarily need to flesh it out now, but just for your consideration. Elementary, middle, high school, if we're not already, our customers at every level, and not necessarily that we're going to promise that whatever they suggest. I know that you're going to get tired of hearing about the 4 chicken nugget saga. My son has taken that on as his personal mantra, but just using that as an example of understanding what really motivates them, what's important to them. And I love that PBIS is so widely utilized, because students at all ages can relate to that. So thank you all very much. I know that was a lot. I tried to condense it as much as possible, but yeah, this is my jam. So we have a law firm of Thomas & Thomas, a medical firm of Jones & Blanchard. Thank you very much.
Thank
Much
you both
appreciated.
so
Thank
much.
you. All right, colleagues, thank you very much. We are winding down. We have a few action items. First up is the textbook selection for African American AP course. I'm sorry? Oh, the textbook selection. We have to, yeah. She's like, wait, what? The presentation that we had heard before and that we, Mr. Tuttle reiterated a good bit on this evening. Yeah. She's like, that was yesterday's me. This is a new me. Okay, the chair will entertain a motion. Is there a motion to accept the recommended textbook? Yes.
I was gonna ask, could we table it because of the naming, and it might not be on the budget for next year, so we still have time. And he also said that all 4 books had the same information in it, but different names. So that's what I'm asking for.
Okay. Comments, feedback?
Just for clarity purposes, you're asking us to table it because we may get the name changed, or you want to go back and relook at all the possible textbooks that can be used to pick a textbook with a different name? Is that, just for clarity purposes, I'm trying to understand what you're asking.
Yes, so he can have an opportunity to look at the other textbooks, so the committee can vote on another name.
So
For the booklet.
So I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
Chairperson. So my question would be to Mr. Lowndes. At this point, we're in a position that the decision for can we go back in the process to relook at textbooks again, just based on the name? Because it was more content, not the name. I'm just trying to be clear.
The board can deny this book, in my understanding, and then we would have to go back and look at one of the other textbooks, because there were four
Yeah, sure. There were four, exactly.
Learning.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And my understanding also is that Mr. Tuttle already addressed the issue of the possible name change.
Right.
And they already denied that.
Correct.
So the
Yes.
publisher denied, I'm sorry, I'm just
No,
trying to
no,
make sure.
no, please.
So the publisher, McGraw-Hill, did deny that they would not change the name because they said the textbook is the textbook name. So if we would go back to revisit, does that mean we have to remove that textbook from consideration, only go with the remaining three? But does that mean we have to go back through public comment, all that all over again, so the cycle begins again for review?
Mr. Schwartz is shaking his head. yes.
Okay, but then my next question would be, do we have time enough to go through that process to have the books purchased to be utilized in the next school year?
Well, let me ask Mr. Schwartz a question.
I'm
So if
sorry.
we had, who came in
No,
second
that's a
in
fair
the,
question.
we couldn't bring the second choice to the board for,
The public already had an opportunity to.
no, we would have to take the
They
book.
have
to
Only
the
presented
public.
this one
That's
based on the
correct.
committee
But I mean, I wouldn't have to
recommendation.
reconvene the committee or anything. No, okay. So but we would bring that, whatever book came in second from the committee to the board to look at.
So for,
And then I would have to then we would put that out for a month for public review and then bring it back.
so for clarity purposes, we would have a truncated process to go look at just the second place book. And we would be doing that, to your point, Ms. Butler-Washington, because of the title, not the content. I just want to be clear what we're making a decision.
Absolutely.
Okay, just wanted to be clear
Okay.
what I was voting on or
Yes.
participating in supporting. or
Much
not.
appreciated.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lyons, thank you so much.
All right, so Ms. Butler-Washington, are you putting on the table then a motion to table?
I move that we table the book selection until the Mr. Lowndes,
So I believe, and I'm going to ask Mr. Schwartz, that you would have to first vote against approving the book.
Right.
And then that would then trigger me going back, getting the second book that came in second, and then bringing that to the next board meeting and presenting that book, and why that book was second and what also that book has, and then putting that book out to the public for a month and then coming back.
Okay, so you're saying, go ahead.
I was gonna say, you actually don't, it's whoever motion came on the floor first is what happens. If they say no, then they can go back and do the whole thing over again. But
what I was
to each
thinking,
his own.
Yeah, and that's because there's not currently a motion on the floor. So if she moves the table, are you saying that that would not automatically then trigger, assuming this passes?
Then there hasn't been a ruling on the
So-
book that we brought, is my understanding.
I'm sorry, so I just want to be clear. So to table means to postpone.
Yes.
So so you can postpone, and then the question is, but that doesn't trigger for staff to go back and bring another option back to the board.
Well, no, I was gonna ask all that, and then Mr. Lowndes asked. 'cause
So
I was
that's
gonna
all
say-
in your motion
yes,
then,
I
is
was
what you're
gonna say
saying?
all in my motion, because I was gonna say table, and then say that, and to give Mr. Lowndes an opportunity to go back to his committee to publish the comments from a month. That was the motion.
So I just want to be very clear that I don't think that motion will work. I think the motion is, in order for us to proceed, the first motion is for you to move not to approve the current textbook that has come before the board. If that motion passes, you can put in another motion that says that or actually, you don't need to put a motion, you can request from the superintendent to bring forward to the board a second option. And we would then go through the process of bringing the second option, describing the second option that we would bring forward, putting it out for public comment, and then bringing it back to the board for action based on the results from public comment on that second option. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but I will retract my motion.
Okay, you want to rescind? Okay. Yeah, and looking at it, it's a subsidiary motion. Okay, so then we should proceed as initially started, where I ask for a motion, however you all want to present it, to either accept the textbook recommendation, and that gets a second, or if someone wants to move to, not accept, and, so Does anyone have a motion?
Yes. I move to not accept the motion.
Not accept the textbook recommendation. Okay. All right. Is there a second? Okay. Ms. Perkins, your second? Yeah. Okay. All right. It's been moved and seconded that we not accept the textbook recommendation for the African American AP course. All right. Is there any discussion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I feel like, I should let, just as who I am, I don't want to say a whole lot about it. I feel like there's more qualified individuals to speak on this topic. So I'm okay with whatever the board wants to do. But I just want to point out, and maybe Mr. Lowndes can clarify, I know when Mr. Tuttle was talking about the different books, he didn't, and correct me if I'm wrong, he didn't say that each book gave, well, maybe he did. I can't. Did he say that each book mirrored each other exactly on the content, or the number?
There were a lot of similarities.
The amount of time dedicated to each subject.
Yes.
And so each book addresses
Same
the
issues.
standards of the College Board for
Correct.
the AP African American course. So each of those books, and that's why they were recommended by AP, would address the course outline.
Sure.
But how they address it in the content itself, specifically, the committee picked the book that I brought.
That's what I thought,
today,
yeah.
because they felt that did the best job. And really, it was the more interactive materials that the book provided, the online materials that the book provides for our teachers and our students. That was the committee felt that this textbook company did a much better job.
Okay.
Would be the most beneficial.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to clarify. So thank you.
Sure.
All right, a little discussion. So if everyone, Ms. Warren and then Ms. Kramer, and we'll move to vote.
Mr. Lowndes, you probably should stay there. So to your point, my question is, so this was not something that the college board or whoever, they suggested 4 books, but the committee selected this one in
Correct. So the
particular.
College Board isn't going to pick a book. They don't endorse one single book or tell school systems they have to pick one single book. What they will do is endorse some books saying that it does meet the criteria for the College Board. And so they said these 4 textbooks met the criteria that would address the curriculum, but it really was up to the school systems to pick which one of those books, or any book that they wanted to use.
And I just want to say that I do understand what some of you are saying. Well, I hear what some of you are saying about the title. For me, I'm just looking at it through the lens of a history teacher, and that's the lens I'm looking through it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Warren. Ms. Kramer, final point?
And I just wanted to, for a point of clarification too, I thought that in the, not today's presentation, but we got a little more context in the previous presentation before it went to committee, or not, I guess, but before today.
Right, that was the recommendation. That's when we brought the recommendation.
Yes, thank you. And I think one of the overwhelming differences in this textbook versus the other recommended textbooks from College Board was the additional digital resources and professional development for teachers, and just the I guess the supplemental resources that were available with this text that could enhance the course that were really not available with other texts. Am I reiterating that
That's
correctly?
correct.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to restate that. Thank you.
Yeah, one final point. I'll reiterate again. The title is horrible. There's no way around that. But I do recall Mr. Tuttle mentioning that John Hope Franklin is someone who's very, very well respected in this field, which is a lot of the reason why this was given weight. So I think that was another point that they gave. All right, so.
I would like to motion to accept the book, and I admittedly.
I know, we have to vote on this. Yeah, we have to vote on, we have to vote. So it's been moved and seconded that we not accept the recommendation for the African American AP Studies book, From Slavery to Freedom. All right, all in favor of not accepting, please raise your hands. Okay, 2, and opposed. All right, the motion fails. Is there another motion? Would you like to proceed?
Yeah, I would like to put a motion on the floor to accept it. And I admittedly, the title gives me some consternation. It really-
Absolutely.
But I actually looked at the book. I went and looked at the resources. I looked at the author and I looked at it in comparison to the other books. And McGraw-Hill could have done a better job titling for the
Yes.
book. But I still do believe that content is much more rich and aligned to the AP because we want our students to be able to pass that AP exam. And we do have a latitude in order to be able to augment that curriculum and discuss why is this title not a great title? You know?
So it's been moved that we accept the title. Second by Ms. Kramer. Any discussion? Briefly, please. Ms. Kramer.
I just want to say I completely agree with Ms. Samisha Thomas. Again, I don't think it can be understated that with the content, because I too reviewed the content and obviously didn't read the entire book. I'll say disclaimer on that. But the content is very rich. And why it's titled the way it is, I do not understand. And it's not reflective of the amount of content that exists in the book. So I just want to say that. But do agree with Ms. Thomas and Ms. Warren as well that the content is really what's most important in this situation. And agree with Mr. Tuttle's comment earlier that this is a teachable moment, you know, to say, hey, the content in this book is great. It begins well beyond, you know, well before slavery, but it doesn't reflect that in the title and that they really could have done a better job on naming this. So I just wanted to state that.
Absolutely agreed. And although we did not receive a ton of feedback, Mr. Tuttle did share this feedback, sadly, was comparable to feedback for other books. So there's that. But, all right, so it has been.
I have one last.
Okay, one last final point.
I wanted to say that he did say the content was very, very similar. The name change, and we heard it from our constituents, the name. And it appears to me that there is a name. It might not be even budget, so I don't even know why we're rushing to do it. So therefore, the content, but look on the outside. This is what your child gonna see. This is what everybody's gonna see. And we're thinking that passing a book because of the inside, you know, people don't look in the inside, they look outward, they look inward. They don't look inward, they look outward. So if the books are the same, I don't know why we're rushing to judgment to pass the book. So I did hear it, and I know if it comes to my house, it would be a problem. So that's my last one on that.
All right, thank you. All right, it's been moved and seconded that we accept the recommendation regarding the African American AP History book. All in favor? And opposed? All right, the motion passes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lowndes.
Thank you, Mr. Lowndes.
All right, next up is Policy 1820, Educational Equity. And this was presented to us last month. We've had many iterations of this particular policy. Dr. Navarro did post, or her staff rather, posted the amended policy so we could see all of the markup. And then a clean version was also posted as well. The chair will entertain a motion regarding Policy 1820.
I move that we accept the policy
Thank you, Ms.
as
Smith.
revised.
It's seconded by Ms. Brenda Thomas. All right, it's been moved and seconded that we accept Policy 1820, Educational Equity. Is there any discussion? Ms. Kramer and then Ms. Samisha Thomas.
I'll just make a real quick point. I just wanted to again thank Dr. Navarro and staff for the work that was done on this. Obviously, I've lost count at this point how many times we looked at it and reviewed it. But I just want to say that is just a testament to how important this policy is.
Absolutely.
And we wanted to make sure that we get it right. And it's my personal opinion that what came back to us with this last edit is more along the lines of what I was looking for.
Yeah.
And that's just, speaking for myself. So I'm confident in voting to pass this policy in the format that was recently presented. So thank you again.
Thank you, Ms. Kramer. Ms. Thomas?
Yeah, thank you for that, Madam Chairwoman. I want to kind of foot stomp the sentiments of Ms. Kramer. I was really pleased that we have done our due diligence here because equity is extremely important and we don't want to leave anyone out, and that includes the staff and the students and our community so that they understand that that is at the forefront of our decision making, and we are considering everybody as we make decisions. And so I'm pleased with the policy, but I also, you know, because we're doing this, we can move forward with all the other policies that we'll be talking about in the future with this equity lens, and that is critically important. It's paramount to us making sure that we're including all students. So I really am glad that we're at this point.
Yes, thank you. And to add also that the amount of feedback that we received from our various populations was crucial. So that was very much appreciated, the intentionality behind that. Okay, final point, Ms. Smith.
No, that was exactly my point. So sort of triple, quadruple the points that have already been made. Definitely wanted to give a shout out to the Equity Task Force that sort of sat with us and went back time and time again to the various communities that Chairwoman Moore-Lee mentioned. I think, again, it's very important that we did all the due diligence that we did.
Absolutely.
So excited to be at this point, and curious to see how this will move forward as we sort of look through the lens that Ms. Thomas spoke about.
All right, thank you. All right, it has been moved and seconded that we accept the educational equity policy 1820. All right, all in favor, please raise your hands. All right, and any opposed? Okay, it's unanimous, right? Yes, okay. Thank you. And the last action items, there are 4 resolutions. One on Mental Health Awareness Month, which is in May, Caribbean American Heritage Month, which is in June, Jewish American Heritage Month, which is in May, right, Ms. Kramer? Yeah. And then LGBTQIA+ Pride Month resolution, which is also in June. Is there any objection to taking these in one motion? Or does anyone want to separate them? Ms. Butler-Washington.
Yes, I would like to separate them.
Okay. All right, one at a time. All right, Chair will entertain a motion to accept the Mental Health Awareness Month resolution. Moved by Ms. Kramer, seconded by Ms. Smith. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor? All right, that is unanimous. Thank you. Next is Caribbean American Heritage Month. Is there a motion? Thank you. Ms. Kramer, second by Ms. Smith. All right. Any discussion? All right. Seeing none, all in favor? All right. That is unanimous. Thank you. Caribbean American Heritage Month. I know. Next is Jewish American Heritage Month. All right. Ms. Thomas and Ms. Smith seconding. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you, that is unanimous. And finally, LGBTQIA+ Pride Month. Ms. Smith, moving, and Ms. Kramer, second. Is there any discussion? Mr. Hancock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to explain my vote on this. I obviously believe that every student and staff member should feel welcome in our system, regardless of their sexuality, or sexual preference, sexual identity. I will be voting against this just for one reason, and it's because I am against the discussion of sexuality with minors in our school system. I in no way am against the LGBTQ plus community. I just don't support the discussion with students that are minors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hancock. Ms. Warren?
Yes, and I have to agree with Mr. Hancock on that as well. Exactly what he said, I agree with that, so I will not be supporting this resolution.
Thank you, Ms. Warren. Ms. Butler-Washington?
Yes, I think that as a parent and a student, we don't want to invade into their homes. We don't know what the parent might think. We don't know. So I don't want to allude or either take their place in discussing things of this nature with their student. If their parents accept it, it's fine. We accept everyone. If some parents might have a problem with it. So I don't want to be in between a parent and a student about this, because this topic is very, very touchy, and it should be addressed. It shouldn't be addressed by us, or we shouldn't put anything in it, because I don't want to have an opportunity or where a parent comes up and says, "I dare you. Who are you?" So we are here to educate students. We're not here to continue on and invade that piece. That's the parents' problem. That's the problem with the parent, and the parent should be able to make a decision on what they want to do.
Thank you, Ms. Washington. A question for Dr. Navarro, to the points that my colleagues have raised, and not looking for you to answer exactly, but generally speaking, what would this look like if passed? Would it then be up to the principals to potentially look at what this might look like in their schools? Because I know we've had this discussion about not wanting for this to feel burdensome.
So like any other resolution that is passed by the Board of Education, as it's written right now, it says that the Board of Education of Charles County endorses the recognition of June 1 to June 30th as the LGBTQIA Pride Month. And so when it endorses it, it means that as a school system, it is discussed what is Pride Month all about, how did it start, what is the purpose of Pride Month, as it would any other resolution that the board puts out there. I think it's a discussion for the board, and it is, every school takes the board's resolutions that they pass and tries as much as possible to recognize that particular time frame, population, whatever it is that the board has recognized, and educate students about why it is being recognized at the system-wide level.
All right, thank you, Dr. Navarro. Any other comments? Ms. Smith and then Ms. Kramer.
So one, I'd like to thank my colleagues for sharing their stance, Ms. Butler-Washington, Mr. Hancock, Ms. Warren, on this particular resolution. I will be voting for it. I am absolutely in support of it. I want to call out a specific line item here on the resolution where it says, Charles County Public Schools is committed to a safe and inclusive school environment where all students are engaged in learning and where staff and students feel accepted and valued in alignment with the core values of equity and inclusivity. This is what this resolution stands for. It doesn't stand for us being in the way of parents or their conversations with their children. This says we recognize and we support all students who come to our doorstep and value them as individuals, and not just students, but also staff. So appreciate your perspectives, appreciate where you will vote. I will respect it, but also want to share my perspectives and what's driving me to vote for this resolution.
Thank you, Ms. Kramer, and then Ms. Samisha Thomas.
Thank you to my colleagues. Thank you, Ms. Smith. You actually took one of the lines that I was going to read from the resolution. Just want to remind my colleagues that a resolution is just what she read, what Ms. Smith read, to make sure that we are saying to our community that we're committed to a safe and inclusive school environment for everyone. And whether you know it or not, our staff, we have staff that's a part of the LGBTQIA plus community. We have parents, we have students, and they are already being certain schools, and I won't call them out, but I know that there are certain schools that are already doing Pride Month celebrations without this resolution. So this just further helps support the work that they're doing in that area. We also have several schools, as mentioned in the resolution, that have GSA clubs or Gender and Sexuality Alliance clubs, which is an effort to promote acceptance, inclusion, and a sense of community for those students. This resolution would support that. The resolution is not curriculum. The resolution is not, we're not directing teachers, to have discussions about, sexuality or sexual preference or any of those things. As Dr. Navarro pointed out, it's an educational opportunity on what is Pride Month, how did it begin, and why it's important to make sure that everyone, again, not just students, we have parents, and we have staff members who are a part of this community. And so I just want to urge my colleagues to understand that as a board member, you should not, in my opinion, be voting on personal opinions or personal beliefs, but in the interest of what is best for the school system. And I'll just leave it there.
Thank you, Ms. Kramer. Ms. Samisha.
Thank you, Ms. Morley. I don't know if my colleagues are familiar with the Trevor Project, but the Trevor Project is something that is for the youth. And if you read their statistics, every year they publish annual statistics about the LBGT community, and every year they talk about the rising number of attempted and considered suicide by those that are part of the LGBT community. And as we talk about the mental health of students, I do believe that we have to think about considering that while it may not be part of our personal beliefs, and may not be a choice or decision that we want to make in our families, but there are young people that are struggling and they are at the brink of deciding on suicide because they don't feel included. So I am leaning to support this and wanting to support it because I want everybody's life to matter. And if you get familiar with the Trevor Project and you think about the number of young people who are wanting to commit suicide because they don't feel included, and also the number of our young people that feel ostracized because someone sitting next to them doesn't accept them and they don't feel like they can be accepted. And I hear my fellow board members' sentiments, and I understand your personal convictions there. But this is about, holding young people in their lives in a way that we make sure that they feel included so that they don't feel ostracized, because those suicide numbers are numbers that we need to be considering. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Warren, and then Mr. Hancock, you had your hand raised. Go ahead.
I just want to say, I heard what all of you have said, and as far as this being personal, well, they do have health education class, and there's some things that are covered in health education class that address the LGBTQ plus community. So that's that. You have that. Secondly, there's a couple of things I want to say, but I'm gonna leave it at that. So that piece I feel is covered. You mentioned that they also have these support programs in school, or these groups, and for students that are part of the LGBTQ plus community. I think that speaks volumes as well. So I feel like it's not that there's nothing in place already, as you stated. So I just feel like if the schools are doing that already, then it's sufficient. And if they feel like they want to share that, I think other schools, like we talked about earlier, different principals sharing, hey, this is what's working at our school. I think that's a matter of the teachers sharing that information with other schools and saying, hey, if you want to start this club, this is how we did that. But to Ms. Butler-Washington's point, the first and foremost, and we've talked about this before, just as a board, we want to keep all kids safe. And I think that includes all kids, to point this group of students out. And I know you all mentioned the adults too. For this particular piece, I'm concerned about the students only, and I'm happy to say that. The first priority for schools is for safety, period. So that's a given. That's what we do. We're in the business of keeping students and staff safe. So I just want to keep it. Some of these resolutions, I have questions about a lot of them actually, and I would suggest too, with some of these resolutions that have already gone forth, when they do these activities, that we be notified so we can come and see them and celebrate or whatever with them. In some instances, if we can, if our schedule permits, because to just let me back up. I'm not going to say that, but so that's where I'm at with that. So we have the groups already in school. That's wonderful. We have the health education curriculum. There's going to be the health department has a whole Prep for Pride event. I mean, it's some community events going on in the community. So that's just, I'm looking through the lens, even as a former health teacher, I'm looking through that same lens. So let that be clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hancock.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I certainly appreciate everyone's discussion on this, and it's good, healthy discussion, and that's a good thing. I just want to say a couple things, and then I'll be finished. I'm actually very familiar with the language where it says Charles County Public Schools is committed to a safe and inclusive school environment where all students are engaged in learning, and where staff and students feel accepted and valued in alignment with core values of equity and inclusivity. And the reason I'm very familiar with it is because 5 years ago, I presented a resolution to make June Diversity and Inclusion Month, a resolution for that. That same language is in a resolution that we already have. And the reason is similar to where we're at now. And again, I have no problem with I want to be very clear, I have no problem, and I think we need to be very accepting of anyone that chooses any lifestyle they choose. And I have a son that goes to high school where they have the Gay Straight Alliance Club. I think it's great. I have a son that's in middle school where they have a Pride Club, and I think that's fine. My concern is a resolution, it covers all schools, and it gets into elementary schools. And I think that when you're talking about sexuality at all, I have a 7-year-old. I don't want anybody talking about sexuality of any kind to my 7-year-old, whether it be straight or whatever. I don't think it's age appropriate. And if you pass a resolution, even if it's just as much as reading that resolution at a board meeting, you have a lot of very young children here. That's all my comments. I just want to reiterate that every student, staff member should be treated with dignity, respect, and be and feel safe in their environment, no matter what lifestyle they live, no matter what they look like. So in no way is a vote, my vote on this, a reflection of how I feel about anyone. And that's it.
Thank you. All right, 1 second, Ms. Bella Washington. I just want to see if Ms. Perkins or Ms. Brenda Thomas want to add anything. You don't have to. I'm just asking because, okay. All right, Ms. Bella Washington. Oh, sorry, Miss. You did? Okay. Sure.
I'm kind of like leaning along with Mr. Hancock as far as the age limit, with going into elementary school, because I do have a gay nephew, so I don't have anything against it or anything like that. But as far as the age limit, I pretty much elementary, I'm kind of like, no, they're still too young. So that's my.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Thomas. Final point, Ms. Bella Washington.
Okay, I just want to say that it's nothing personal. It's just that it's a parent's decision. I don't want no one talking to my child about that piece. It's gonna be me, because we're gonna have a lot of issues if parents say, if people come and we asking the schools to abide by our resolution, that means elementary all the way to 12th. And I don't want it to be seen as it's something that we're enforcing parents to do, because that to me belongs in the house. That's between you, your husband, and your children. And that's as far as it goes. We're here to, bless you, we're here to educate our students, and we're doing a great job of doing that, and I want to continue doing that. I want to keep our eyes focused on educating our students and making sure when they leave Charles County Public Schools that they are successful after adulthood. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And I'll just make a brief comment, as I feel like a lot of my points have already been stated. I wrote the mental health resolution in part with this particular community in mind, because just as Ms. Thomas says, even if it's not a choice you personally would make, even if it's not something you support, you have to recognize that these are human beings, and your children are already having these conversations. 100%. Just being very candid with you. And I don't see it as a sexuality thing as much as it's understanding that someone lives differently than you do. And I didn't really distinguish it in my mind that much from being, recognizing Arab Americans or Jewish Americans or other populations, Caribbean Americans that are oftentimes marginalized. And I think if we remove some of the fear that people have and have these candid conversations, I think that I'm hoping that it will make people feel more comfortable and understand that, I have a 7-year-old as well, so I can appreciate that, Mr. Hancock. My 7-year-old told me yesterday that one of his friends is a gold digger. I said, wait a minute. True story. I said, well, how do you even know that term? And come to find out, his older brother heard it, and the reason why he said that the little girl was a gold digger is, I'm trying to say it with a straight face, because she was using a little boy for his Robux. This is how they process at 7. So that to him is a gold digger. I was so completely floored. I said, how do you know what that means? So I say that to say, as parents, they're already having these conversations. They're already around the internet. They're already around older siblings and you're not your child's only influence. So I 100% respect and appreciate, and I feel the same, that as a parent, these are conversations that should come and start with me and our family, and be respectful, but also understand whether you have the conversations or not, your children already know. If you really have that heart-to-heart, you'd be surprised at the conversations that they have. But for me, the reason why I will be supporting it is because these are human beings that feel marginalized, that feel targeted, that don't feel seen, and I don't think that as a school system, that should be how we function. Just my thoughts. So with that said, thank you all very much, and we will now vote. So all in favor of the resolution? 1, 2, 3, 4, and opposed? 1, 2, 3. All right, so the resolution fails. All right, thank you all. Ms. Brenda Thomas.
Motion adjourned.
Is there a second? Second. I'm assuming this is unanimous, yes? All right, thank you all very much. All right, please take us off the air, Kyle. Thank you.